Good evening. I would like to call to order the October 20th, 2010 meeting of the Milton School Committee. Please stand and join me in saluting the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll begin this evening by approving the agenda for tonight's meetings. Are there any additions or corrections? Ms. Gormley?
I would ask that under the superintendent's report, I'm going to add Margaret Gibbons on the flu clinic first. And under the superintendent's report, delete Alan Cron for this evening. And under the finance subcommittee report, would you add, and Mrs. Kelly's agrees, the guidance department head and the end of the year report? So that's two items to add under finance. And we inadvertently left off on your agenda. Would you add next meeting items at the end?
And old business.
And old business at the end. And a special note, we try very hard to get you all the materials on Fridays. Hopefully you all received today from Tony Cacello an updated consolidated facilities report. I have copies here if you don't have it with you this evening. And I have copies of the whole packets if you need anything. And under John Phelan's report on field trips, there'll be one small edit. He'll have a handout. And we work really hard not to do this to you the night of the meeting because I know you come prepared, but those are changes this evening.
Anything else? Ms. Bagley-Jones?
It looks like we left off response to citizens speak.
That was old business agenda. Yep, that's what I added back in, sorry. Yes. Any other additions or corrections? Okay, so we'll accept those as written. Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to invite Diane Crowley, who is an English teacher at Milton High School, and two very special members of Milton High School, John Savino and Michelle Nabby, sorry, to join us for a special introduction.
Tonight, it is always with great excitement and pleasure that we come to the table to start a new year of student representation on the school committee. In 1973, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts enacted legislation that allows for student representation at the table, and our students are grateful for that. This is a remarkable opportunity, and while this is supposed to be across the Commonwealth, we know that it is the Milton Public Schools, the Superintendent's Office, and the Milton School Committee that are extraordinary in reaching out to students and engaging them in dialogue about so many important things. And I am grateful, and I know that Dr. Drotter is grateful. These kids are grateful, their parents are grateful for the kindness and professionalism you share with them and what you teach them and show them by example and the welcoming environment that you create. So John and Michelle are here and will be with you for your meetings throughout the school year, and they are just 2 of 29 school-wide or grade-wide student representatives who ran for office this September. And I applaud the faculty, my colleagues, and Dr. Drotter, Mrs. Beach, and Mr. Cron for their encouraging kids to get involved. We embrace civic awareness, we embrace leadership, and we're able to do that because of the support that you give to us. So thank you for that. John is a returning member of the school committee this year. He's a second-year member with you, and he has been named chairman in this group to speak back to the student government. He's a senior, a member of the class of 2011. He's a member of the National Honor Society, a founding member of the Milton High School debate team, a member of Habitat for Humanity and Amnesty International. John is looking to pursue a degree in engineering and the sciences, and we're grateful for his presence here. And with all of these school activities and keeping up with homework and his involvement at Milton High School, he still manages to work a part-time job at the Common Market, and he also holds a gig at the Who's It Club working on an event-by-event basis. So that's a good thing.
Wow.
And Michelle is back with the student government after a year hiatus, serving last year as a junior class president. And she decided that she liked the involvement of the politics and policy enough that she wanted to come back into this realm of student service. She's the vice president of the Spanish Club, secretary of the newly founded American Red Cross, and is a member of the National Honor Society and Key Club. This past year, Michelle studied abroad in Spain and completed a community service project in Costa Rica. She works as a tutor in Milton, helping kids out with math, and she too is an eager and excited representative here. This year, John and Michelle are going to be working with other student leaders on the student government, and some of our projects include this year, spearheaded by these two, creating a voter awareness campaign for the upcoming gubernatorial election on November 2nd. So they will be holding a mock election for students to participate in, to vote on the governor's race, and on the 3 statewide ballot initiatives. Additionally, we have our monthly Good Going. Good Going is a program where peers nominate other peers when they see them do something good, something nice. And the student government, with these guys leading, go out and ambush a kid in class and visit them, and we have songs and t-shirts and beads, and we congratulate and thank these students on a monthly basis for bringing goodness to Milton High School. Every year, the student government conducts a student survey. Past years, we've looked into the topics of student stress, preparedness for the future, school culture and climate. This year's topic remains to be seen, remains to be decided, but ask these kids any questions as the months pass, and they will be able to answer anything that you need to know. And one of our favorite days of the year at Milton High School is Literature Appreciation Day, where the student government looks to raise literacy awareness, and we invite students and teachers to dress as their favorite literary characters, and we give out 40, 50 prizes and gift cards to bookstores. We give out candy and pencils and all sorts of fun things, and we have a ceremony at the end of the day. And Michelle and John will be active in those events as well. Thank you for the kindness that you extend to them. Thank you for welcoming student participation in civic opportunities.
Thank you. Well, do we have any questions for them before they join us at the table here? Well, I'd just like to say how much we appreciate having you here, and feel free to raise your hand and speak at any time at any one of our meetings. It's really a pleasure to have the student representatives here as a part of our school committee. And thank you, Ms. Crowley, for all you do. I don't know how they find time in those busy schedules to fit this in, but we appreciate it. Thank you. We'll move on to citizen speak right now. I just have to say, people at home have no idea how really exciting it was to walk in here tonight and see this sea of people and all these activities going on in the backside of the room, all pertaining to arts in our schools. So would the people like to come up together, or how would you like to do this? Do you want me to call you one at a time? Okay, so we have John Galooly, Jess Galooly, Jen Sutherland, Bridget Mastrandrea, and Laura Canada. Okay, Bridget, you want to come separately?
Okay.
Ms. Gorman?
Are we good to go?
Yes, you may begin. Just, could you please introduce yourselves and say where you live?
Yeah,
your
my name
address.
is John Galooly. I live at 321 Canton Ave. I have one daughter, Rose, in the first grade at Cunningham. Is that good now? And I have one son, Johnny, who's going to be entering Cunningham kindergarten next year. As a superintendent just reminded me, I'm also on site council at the Cunningham School. I'm part of this group, some of which are here tonight, and we kind of view tonight as the first step in the beginning of what will be a sustained effort to not only restore the art program to full-time at the elementary level, but to also reinvent and reestablish the entire art program across the board. We began the process a couple months ago. We started to go through a lot of the math, a lot of the numbers that were available to us online, a lot of Department of Ed data about the different towns that were comparable to us. And, you know, to be honest, when we went into that process, we were under the assumption that what we were going to find was that all of the towns were just like Milton, that we were going to see art programs that had been decimated due to budget cuts and to the pressures imposed by MCAS. And as we went through that process, we were very surprised to find that that was not the case, okay? And we found Milton to be the outlier in this study. It was the only town that did not have a full-time art program, and in comparison to every one of them, the art program was about half the size in terms of teachers. Later on, some of the speakers are going to go into some more facts about the numbers of each of those towns. But what we determined along the way was that Belmont seemed to be the one town that we could compare ourselves to up and down with all the numbers. Same population, same amount of students, same amount of teachers. They have 4 elementary schools, one of which is Title I. They have one middle school. They have 1 high school. Everything is the same across the board. The MCAS scores are similar. Milton has 4.5 visual art teachers. Does everybody in here know, or would you like to guess, how many teachers are in Belmont? 12. Okay? Throughout that process, you know, clearly we were asking ourselves throughout why this could be. How could that be that, you know, I didn't mention it, but the spending per pupil is the same. We're looking at all these factors, and nothing could explain to us how that could possibly be. And in the middle of that process, 2 weeks ago, we knew we were going to be doing this presentation, so I turned on the TV and watched the last meeting. And in doing so, the art department presented last time, and it was actually fascinating TV, I will add. And the exchange between Miss Kelly and Miss Hughes, to me, was like an epiphany. I had a revelation, and immediately I said, now I know what I think the problem is. And to me, the problem is the culture. And I don't know what happened along the way, but somehow the culture of this entire system is biased against the visual arts. I don't think it's a conspiracy, I just think it's something that has eroded over time. Following the presentation of the arts, Miss Kelly asked Miss Hughes how many students she sent to art college the previous year, somehow inferring that the answer to that question was going to reflect the success of her program. I literally, and Jess can attest to this, I was yelling at the TV. I couldn't believe that, number one, that was the question.
You know, Miss,
And then-
excuse me for one second. If you could refrain from addressing individual school committee members.
No, it was just a question that was asked from, okay, a school committee member.
Right,
Okay.
thank you.
And so the school committee members and Ms. Hughes went back and forth bantering about the semantics of what the question was. And in the end, all I could think to myself was, you know, who cares what the answer to that question is? You know, when the math department comes in here and the head is giving the state of his program, nobody says, excuse me, but how many math majors did you produce last year? It doesn't matter. When the football coach comes in here, fighting for his budget, fighting for the program, nobody judges his program on how many NFL players he's produced in the last 45 years. In the end, it doesn't matter. That's not their mission, that's not their charge. The mission of those programs in the school in general is to produce students that have a well-rounded education. They leave here with literacy in many different areas, and once they have that, they can go out into the world or to college, and they have the freedom to choose what they want in life. That's the goal. Now, that being said, the math program may produce a Nobel Prize winner, and an NFL player might come out of this program, but those are just bonuses that come out, all right? I'd be more proud of a math program that sends every graduate out with the skills to be able to succeed in anything they want to do. And I'm more proud of a football program that instills the character and the work ethic and the discipline that a football program gives. Those people go into their life with those skills, and those things can never be taken away. And I think we have to acknowledge that those are the truths of why those programs exist. We as parents view the visual arts in this system and in every system to be part of the core curriculum. We expect graduates of this system to be literate in the visual arts. Now, I'm a photographer. I work every day with advertising people, marketing people, public relations people. They're in the education field, they're in the medical field, they're lawyers, they're doctors. I would estimate, and I'd be surprised, if 3% of the people that I work with went to art college, majored in art, or really focused any of their younger life on those areas. But every one of them deals with images every day. They deal with design, they deal with graphics. And in large part, the success that they have at their job is dependent upon them being literate in those areas. In this room, for example, everything that you see, everything that everybody in here is wearing was produced and created by an artist. Right? This isn't a narrow slice of education. It's not a narrow slice of our life. It's everything that we see. Art education is not teaching kids to draw and paint. It's about teaching people to see, to analyze, to create, to invent things. And it's a way of thinking that cannot be replicated by any of the other programs that you have in school. There's nothing else that can fill that void. We as a group recognize those examples that I just spoke about as truth. But somewhere along the line, in this system, the visual arts have been eroded to a point where it's no longer a valued part of the core curriculum. I know, and I've seen the meetings, and I've seen a lot of you verbalize support for the arts. I've seen you speak about the values of it and how much you appreciate what it produces, and all of the things that we say, we all talk about that stuff. But in the end, the state of the program right now as it is says otherwise. I'd like to close by reading the March 18th, 2010 e-blast that went out this past year. As many of you know, and I'm reading now, as many of you know, March is Music in Our Schools Month. Here in the Milton schools, we strive to give our students a well-rounded education. Exposure to music and the arts are critical components of our educational program. Our music department is widely recognized as one of the best in the area. Thanks to the residents of this town, along with the generosity of the Copeland Foundation, our music classrooms are well equipped. The Copeland donations include 2 music labs, one at Milton High and one at Pierce. These labs have digital pianos with computers attached so students can use software that lets them write music, practice theory, learn to play the piano. In addition, the Copeland Foundation donated musical instruments for the strings and band. They have also donated a digital piano at Tucker, Glover, Pierce, and the high school for music class, along with acoustic pianos at Tucker, Glover, and Milton High School for chorus, and as that sentence is repeated twice. The Copeland Family Foundation refurbished the original grand piano at Milton High School in the auditorium, financed the acoustic shell of the Milton High School auditorium, and donated Orff instruments for Glover and Tucker music classes. Despite such generosity, the music department, along with our other school departments, has struggled to maintain its high standards during budget cutbacks. For example, in the past few years, we have eliminated our 4th and 5th grade weekly chorus class. We have also reduced music to a half-year course for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders and eliminated band class for the elementary school bands, who now must practice during lunch and recess. However, many of our students continue to thrive in our programs, and there is no better example of this success than our March concerts. Please review the list below and make a point to come and support our wonderful music students. As educators, we are well aware of the correlation between arts education and improved academic success. There are many studies which show that music education enhances the same higher brain function required for mathematics, chess, science, and engineering. In addition, participation in musical groups such as concert, band, and chorus teaches students how to work cooperatively, solve problems, and realize the link between effort and quality of result. For these reasons and many others, we strive to support music education in our schools. It goes on to say that we'd like to thank all of the different teachers by name and title. At the end, I would like to recognize Dr. Noreen Diamond Burdett, Director of Fine and Applied Arts, who teaches mixed chorus, girls chorus, and AP theory at Milton High, and directs the 4 after-school vocal ensembles in Milton High. Dr. Burdett has been responsible for building a dynasty in our music department, which is admired by other school districts across the state. Kudos to our hardworking music teachers and students who consistently qualify for state and regional competitions, as well as perform in countless concerts, parades, and community events. And there's not one mention in there of the visual arts. Okay? I think when we listen to that, I think what it tells me is that's an amazing program. That's what we want. All right? That program is not necessarily there because of you guys. That program's there because there's a passionate leader who is the champion of music. That leader goes out and fights for music, is a watchdog for the program, and then is the champion of every student that participates in that program. Now, I only read that whole thing to you because it's not just Music Month, the month of March. It's Art in the Schools Month, and yet we saw nothing. You're not going to find a word in there about the visual arts. Why is that? I'm missing one. I'm missing a page, so I'm on my own. You know, in the end, I know that the natural inclination here is to kind of put up your armor and to get defensive and to try to, you know, come up with the explanations of why this is and excuses. But in the end, none of that matters. Right now, this program as it is unacceptable. And that's a fact. And what I'd really like is, you know, if you guys, you know, after you listen to everyone speak and we go home and we really think about this, what I'm wondering is if we can be honest with ourselves and with us and come up with some ideas about how it could possibly be that this program could get to the point where it really has eroded so much that it is not a part of the core curriculum anymore. And, you know, to close, what damage does that do? How much are our children losing for the fact that they don't have this program? Thank you.
So this is going to be a little difficult for me because usually we ask our people to speak at Citizen Speak for 3 minutes, and we don't usually enforce that rule, but we do have 4 other people to speak. So I don't know if there's a way you could limit your time to 3 minutes or move this. Yeah. That would be greatly appreciated. So your name and your information. Thank you. We have a full agenda.
I'll be quick. My name is Jessica Luley, and I'm a parent of a first-grade student at Cunningham. I've spent an enormous amount of time researching our elementary art program as well as the surrounding programs. Art education is not only my profession, but it is my passion. And these are some of the facts that I found. I just want to say out loud what the elementary art program is right now here in Milton. Today, students receive 10.5 hours of art for the entire school year. And further, because of scheduling, many students go a complete calendar year without an art class. So they might have it in the fall and ending in January and not have it again until the following January. In addition, the current schedule breaks down that 10.5 hours into classes of 30 minutes, which art, unlike other classes, requires setup and cleanup time. Oh, can you hear me now? To about 5 to 7 hours total for the year. So I'm just going to read really quick some of the surrounding towns. I looked at about 9 to 10 towns, and I left out Canton because I just looked them up last night. I forgot about them. But for Quincy, they get 45 minutes of art per week for the entire year, which comes out to be 32.5 hours total. Westwood, 50 to 90 minutes of art per year, which comes out to be almost 65 hours of art. Holliston, 50 minutes, and we looked into Holliston because they also have a French immersion program, and while I was looking at on their website, I saw that they also have an art gallery in their high school. They get 35.7 hours of art. Newton is 1 hour per week, which comes out to be 43 hours of art per year, which is remarkable. Watertown, 40 minutes, which comes out to be 25.8 hours. Franklin, 45 minutes a week for the entire year, 32.5 hours of art. Belmont, 45 minutes, 32.5 hours total. Situate, 40 minutes a week for the entire year, 25.8 hours. And Braintree, 40 minutes for 25.8 hours of art. Milton gets 30 minutes of art per week for half the year, which comes out to be 10.5 hours. And if your child is unlucky to have art on a Monday for all the holidays, they get about 8 hours of art for the entire year.
Thank you.
I have some members of Milton High School here to help me with some visual aids when the time arises. So I'll stand over there. So my name is Jen Sutherland, and I'm here tonight as a concerned parent and member of the Milton community in opposition to the cuts in visual art education in the Milton Public Schools. I have 3 children currently in the system, 1 in the high school, 1 in the middle school, and 1 at the integrated preschool. And I have watched the art program here slowly deteriorate, losing more teachers and more resources every year since my daughter started at Glover 11 years ago. I'm also voicing my concern from a professional standpoint. I've been an art educator for 7 years in the Newton Public Schools, and I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in education from Lesley University. Newton elementary students have art for 1 hour a week, plus an extra art enrichment period every 5 weeks. Newton also has some of the highest MCAS scores in the state, and I make this point to demonstrate that having art for an hour a week has not had a negative impact on their MCAS scores. Art is a subject area that's mandated by the federal No Child Left Behind Act. Nevertheless, its position has been weakened in favor of raising test scores in academic areas such as math and literacy, for which school systems are held accountable in standardized tests. In times like these, when cuts are being made, we often hear the argument that the arts are important because they improve students' performance in other areas. While that may be the case, by justifying our art programs solely on an instrumental basis, we minimize the inherent value of arts education to develop human potential. Art is a powerful form of communication. We draw strength from the power of the images and traditions that define our cultures and communities. In this global economy, our children are exposed to symbols and visual messages from around the world on a daily basis. It's more important than ever that they become visually literate in order to understand the subtle meanings behind the traditions and belief systems of other cultures. And understanding visual culture is best accessed through a meaningful, multicultural art education. This summer, an article came out in Newsweek called Creativity in America, the Science of Innovation and How the U.S. Lost Its Edge. The authors reveal a creativity crisis in which research shows that in the past 10 years, American students' IQs have risen while their creativity quotients, or CQs, have fallen drastically. The article states that the main reason for this is a lack of concerted effort to nurture the creativity of all children in American schools. We're faced with the reality that the MCAS is the instrument through which we must evaluate our students' achievement. As teachers and parents, we must look for ways to effectively prepare students for this task while continuing to teach the whole child. A majority of questions on the MCAS require students to use high-level critical thinking skills, such as observe, identify, list, define, infer, discuss, compare, contrast, analyze, evaluate, and so on. We practice these skills regularly in art class. What are we doing when trying to make meaning of a work of art? We observe the piece. We identify and list its parts. We define and analyze its meaning. Through discussion, we make inferences based on life experience and prior knowledge. We compare it to other works of art or other concepts. And based on this, we offer an evaluation of the piece in the form of an opinion. Beyond this, engaging in creative acts offers students the opportunity to put plans into action in spontaneous and open-ended and hands-on ways. The ability to transform media and explore multiple solutions to problems allows children to take ownership of their ideas, view themselves as agents of change, capable of making a positive impact on the world. I need a drink of water. This type of learning differs from regular classroom activities like doing problem sets for honing skills and memorizing information for quizzes. These tasks target much later payoffs. We want to encourage our students to be personally engaged in their work and to develop a lifelong love of learning. They need to have a balance of both types of learning in their both types of educational experience throughout the day. Another important aspect of art's intrinsic value is its ability to help us synthesize information and organize our thoughts in a visual way. In their book, Studio Thinking, Lois Hetland and Ellen Winner conducted research into what skills were being taught in art classes. Their findings resulted in the 8 habits of mind. Develop craft. Engage and persist. Envision. Express. Observe. Reflect. Stretch and explore. And understand the art world. We don't have to look for new or hidden ways for the arts to enhance or augment student achievement. It's already there in plain sight. We simply need to acknowledge the arts as an important component of human development and celebrate its inherent value. We need to make the arts part of the culture of this community. I'd like to conclude by pointing out that we're living in a changing world with shifting paradigms. In Daniel Pink's book, A Whole New Mind, he predicts the formation of a new creative class of workers in whom thinking and problem solving will be valued over other skills. With many jobs being outsourced to other countries, Pink states that the MFA will be the new MBA, and the creative minds of artists and innovators will become a valued commodity. In Susie Gablick's book, The Reenchantment of Art, she highlights the work of environmental artists and activists whose work paints a bleak picture of our future. The reality is that our planet is dying, and our children have to fix it. We don't only need problem solvers, we need people who can identify what the problems are. Who is going to be able to reimagine our world as a sustainable, diverse, and peaceful place? Certainly not the stockbrokers, computer programmers, or sports heroes that our culture emphasizes today. It will be the artists, innovators, social activists, and creative thinkers who weren't simply taught to a test, but taught as a whole child to observe, to think, to question, and to imagine, secure in the knowledge that there can be more than one solution to every problem.
Can you hear me? I'm Laura Kanata, and I live at 170 Center Street. I have 2 children at the Cunningham. One is a first grader and a kindergartner. Thank you for welcoming us here tonight and for allowing us to take part in this meeting and express our thoughts. Artists like to do that, so we're happy to be here. And thank you, parents, for being here and showing you care and that you support the arts. I was astounded, even shocked, to learn how little time is allotted for arts instruction in elementary school. I was further surprised to learn how Milton Public Schools' art instruction time compares to our neighboring communities. This made me realize that the position of the visual arts in the school curriculum is not as important as I had hoped or as I had expected. I feel sad thinking that it's not valued, that there are no resources, or there's simply not enough time in the day. It made me think, why do we even bother to have a program if it is 10 hours? Importantly, this situation raises questions for me. What are the core components and learning objectives of the elementary school experience? And what is the educational philosophy and priorities of the Milton Public Schools? From my creative experiences as an artist, dancer, craftsperson, I strongly believe that the arts offer a way to learn that no other subject in school can achieve. It can provide opportunities for exploring and making your own decisions where rules and correct answers don't prevail. It's about yourself and how you think for self-expression, allowing children to express their feelings that sometimes they don't even have words for yet. They develop their fine motor skills. They develop complex forms of problem solving, following directions, learning about history, context, why was this art made at this time, what was going on. It's a very powerful learning tool. They can discover a range and variety of emotions, joy, inspiration, sadness, ugliness. These are questions we want our children to think about as they grow and develop into strong, well-rounded people. In my professional life as a grants writer for a children's museum, I write about child development, while hands-on learning experiences are the best way for kids to learn. I strongly believe the human brain wants, likes, and grows with visual images. According to educational research and brain research, fostering visualization of curricular content is one of the strongest ways to help material enter the brain and stay there. I have no visuals with me today, but when I am writing a grant, preparing a PowerPoint presentation, or doing a myriad of fundraising activities, I draw upon my creative skills to bring the vision of the organization I work for into a convincing case, both through written word and using compelling visual images. No doubt the skills I honed in arts classes have helped me to do this effectively. Obviously, I've not been an elementary student myself for quite a long time, nor do I have the professional training to know exactly what an elementary school education should be. I rely on the teachers, the principal, the administration, and school leadership to have the vision and to be the experts and implementers. I want an explanation for the current position of arts education in our schools, and I want a vision for how we plan to make it better. I believe the visual arts are essential to a high quality and balanced education. I want the visual arts to have a significant, dedicated place in my children's education. Knowing whether the schools can help with this, or if it's solely on my family's shoulders, will be helpful to know. I'm not shy of that opportunity. I relish it, but I think and I hope for the sake of all children's growth and development, it will be across the board for all children in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have for Citizen Speak, Bridget Mastrandon. Drea, sorry.
Hi, my name is Bridget Mastandrea. I have 3 school-age children. One is with me this evening. When I explained to her why I was putting these words together tonight, and her older sister told her that art was going to end at Christmas, she gasped. It's always a sad day in our house when one of my children wakes up and announces, today is going to be a terrible day because I don't have anything special in school to do. As parents and educators, we know that art helps children grow and develop through creative thinking and feeling, that through the process of doing art, kids learn critical thinking, problem solving, and develop social, emotional, and physical skills. But really, art doesn't have to equate academic genius. It gives the kids the chance to express their creativity and learn what art is about in the freedom that art is about the freedom to think out of the box. I'd like to read you the 10 lessons the arts teach, written by Elliot Eisner, professor of education and art at Stanford University. Art teaches children to make good judgments about qualitative relationships. Unlike much of the curriculum, in which correct answers and rules prevail, in the arts it is judgment rather than rules that prevail. The arts teach children that problems can have more than one solution and that questions can have more than one answer. The arts celebrate multiple perspectives. One of their large lessons is that there are many ways to see and interpret the world. The arts teach children that in complex forms of problem solving, purposes are seldom fixed, but change with circumstances and opportunity. Learning in the arts requires the ability and a willingness to surrender to the unanticipated possibilities of the work as it unfolds. The art makes vivid the fact that neither words in their literal form nor numbers exhaust what we can know. The limits of our language do not define the limits of our cognition. The arts teach students that small differences can have large effects. The arts traffic in subtleties. The arts teach students to think through and within a material. All art forms employ some means through which images can become real. The arts help children learn to say what cannot be said. When children are invited to disclose what a work of art helps them feel, they must reach into their poetic capacities to find the words that will do the job. The arts enabled us to have experience we can have from no other source, and through such experience to discover the range and variety of what we are capable of feeling. The arts' position in the school curriculum symbolizes to the young what adults believe is important.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's our policy not to respond to citizens speak. At our next meeting, that will be on our agenda, and school committee members will have an opportunity to respond. Okay. So we'll move on in our agenda, and that is the approval of our school committee minutes from September 8th.
So moved. Second.
Do we have any discussion around this?
No, I had a request that we could respond, given the number of people that are here who made the effort to come out tonight.
Is that the wish of the
It's a
school
motion. I
committee?
don't know if anybody else will second that. Just there's a lot of people here, and I hate to wait till next week or in 2 weeks.
I second that.
So we'll take a vote. Any discussion around this? All in favor? Okay. So, parents, I don't know if you just, family members, if you just heard that, art supporters, we voted to have some discussion about your, brief discussion about your comments tonight. Ms. Bagley-Jones?
I'll be brief. I appreciate the flexibility the chair and the other school committee members have shown. I just see with all the parents that came out tonight, I didn't want to wait 2 weeks to respond to you. I'm not embarrassed, and I'm not the only person at the table who's a passionate advocate for the arts. I think you raised really good questions tonight that we have to seriously think about. I agree with you completely about the importance of visual arts and music in our schools, and I'd like us to try to find ways to put art back in the elementary schools. It is a financial issue, but for me as a school social worker, as a school committee member, as a parent, I think visual arts are crucial for kids' social and emotional development. I think it's a reason many kids go to school, especially as they get into middle school and high school. I think it does help with academic achievement, and I think we need to think about whether we want to be a school system that offers 30 minutes of art a week for half a year, or whatever the 10 hours a year that horrifying statistic, and what we can do creatively to think outside the box, because I do believe art education is very, very important, and I know other people on the school committee do too. You've raised the awareness, you've brought the issue to us, and we need to respond, and I'm certain that we will, because it's very important to all of us. Sorry, I just felt the need, I had to say that. Thank you. I just felt the need. Thank you for letting, I don't know if other people want to speak
Would anyone
too.
else like to speak to this?
Dennis, go ahead.
Oh, next time. I gotta think
Okay,
about it.
thank you very much. We really do
Thank you for
appreciate
coming.
you coming out. Thank you. So we have a motion on the table to accept the minutes of our September 8th, 2010 school committee minutes. Do we have any discussion or corrections?
No.
Hearing none. No.
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly, do you have a question about it?
No, I'm sorry, I'm just working on something else. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
It just seemed like you were. Okay. All in favor? Opposed?
Abstain.
You're abstaining.
Yeah.
One abstention. Okay, thank you. Accept a motion to accept the school committee minutes of September 22nd, 2010.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion or corrections? Mrs. Kelly?
I don't have the print before me, but typically in our minutes, when there's a motion made, it's separated from the text. It's almost, a separate line that says a motion was made. It describes the motion, then gives the vote. I think there was a vote in there that wasn't written that way, and I just would ask that it be put in that same format. And I apologize, I don't have the text in front of me.
I do, I just can't find it in my pile of paper. Is that clear to everyone what Mrs. Kelly is asking for, just broken apart from the rest of the text? Okay. Any other additions or corrections? All in favor? Opposed? With that friendly amendment. Thank you, it's unanimous. And we'll move into the superintendent's report. Ms. Gormley?
Thank you, Chairman Sheridan. First, I'd like to invite Margaret Gibbons to the table, our lead nurse, who asked to address the school committee and the public this evening. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, everybody. And yes, I did ask, because this is where we're beginning our publicity campaign for our second annual flu clinic. We had such success last year with our seasonal flu clinic that we, after consultations with Ms. Gormley and Mr. Phelan, we decided we would continue to do this community outreach. We felt it was a very positive thing for the community. The nurses were very much on board with it. Just to remind you, last year we did it the Saturday before Christmas with all nurses in attendance with not one complaint. This year we're being a little different outside of the box. We're going to plan it for Monday, November the 8th from 4 to 7 at the Pierce Middle School. We thought this might be a better opportunity to catch kids that were being picked up in their after-school programs, could swing by before they went home. We're targeting grades 6 to 12, just like we did last year. And just an FYI, because children under the age of 9 need 2 shots, then we're only planning 1 clinic. Having said that, though, if a parent comes along with a child from the elementary school who is 9, we will gladly immunize them that afternoon. So the one thing that is new this year, and I'm working the details out with Mr. Gillis, is we are going to be able to do billing for our services. It's something that state is promoting, DPH is supporting, and we are working through a process to do that. When I say billing, your eyes please do not light up. We are not talking about a large amount of money. We are talking about a delivery for the services the nurses are provided, that the insurance companies will be billed for. And just if parents are listening at home, there is no copay, nothing. It's just bring your insurance card and we do all the work. And your son or daughter, and yourself if you need a flu shot, will go home with your right arm a little sore. The other reason I asked Ms. Gormley if I could come is to begin to educate the community that this year we will be beginning to monitor BMI and be doing BMIs on grades 1, 4, 7, and 10. It's an unfunded mandate. It's a directive coming down by DPH. It's a requirement of many grants that we hope to be applying for.
And
that we are in
BMI,
fact doing and collecting this data.
and BMI stands for Body Mass
It
Index.
is, I'm sorry,
Just
yes.
to clarify, sorry.
BMI is your body mass index. It's an actual mathematical calculation. It should be on your son's or daughter's physicals now from your pediatrician. There should be a slot for it. We're working out the protocols. We haven't got them all down pat yet. Parents' consent, parent opting out, all of the things that you're thinking about at home or here, we're thinking about too, and we'll come back and tell you what they are before we really implement. We will be working closely with the phys ed health teachers to do this. They've been very supportive in getting this initiative jump-started. And I think I promised Ms. Gormley I would be very quick, and I am true to my word. If anybody has any questions for me?
Mrs. Kelly?
Medicaid reimbursement going.
It's similar to that. It's similar to the Medicaid reimbursement that we're already doing across the district, actually pre-K to 12. And yes, the Board of Health, actually, after I spoke with them, they are going to work with the same group we are going to work with. And they were very pleased to hear that we had a good experience.
Mrs. Kelly?
So do we believe last year, due to the flu clinic that we had, that the incident of flu at the grade levels that we targeted were decreased?
Compared that data to the spring before, we clearly were in the normal ranges last year. So we were very happy with the outreach, even though, albeit it came late because the vaccine was very difficult to acquire last year from the state. And the new piece this year, this one injection, this one vaccination, is seasonal and H1N1. So there's no. Last year they were separate. This year it's one. So we're hoping that we even get a better turnout, and if giving the timing the week before Christmas, having it earlier, we think we're going to be able to reach our target group, which would be, we hope to reach 400, at least 400 students.
That's wonderful. Ms. Gormley?
I'd like to recognize Margaret Gibbons and our Milton school nurses. This is above and beyond. This is their initiative, and they meet as a group, and they're going to make this happen for Milton's children and their families. So we will open the PS school from 4 to 7 o'clock on November 8th, which is a Monday evening. And I appreciate their initiative in doing this, and their work.
We will stay longer if we have vaccine and if people are still there.
And you're
That
targeting.
that was the target. We're targeting grades 6 through 12.
And if they come, individuals, families come with their health forms, the staff will do all the work.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Ms. Bagley-Jones?
The other project you did, the BMI, was that a grant you applied for?
We received a small grant from Milton Hospital, yes, and so that's going to help us with some substitute coverage and other additional support. But yes, a very nice grant from Milton Hospital that we applied for and did receive. Yes.
But just to clarify, that's an unfunded mandate from the state. That has, I mean, the grant that you got helps.
Will help us in a small way.
Right.
You know, the resources put in, if I don't have the math in front of me, you have enrollment numbers, but if you look at the numbers in grades 4, 5, 7, and 10, that's the number of children that have to be screened, in addition to scoliosis, grades 5 through 9, in addition to vision and hearing, grades 1 through 5, grade 7, grade 10. I mean, I can't begin to tell you the numbers of children that have to be screened for various things, and I didn't want to do that tonight, but as long as I'm here, you add these numbers up, and our number of nursing staff hasn't increased. It's gone the other way. So we're doing a really good job with the nurses that we have in place. And we recognize that these things have to be done, and we're working out, as I say, the protocols and how to do it with the cooperation of phys ed and anybody else that wants to help. But it's a lot of data. We're going to have to do reporting to DPH in the aggregate. No names attached, but the aggregate numbers that where they fall. And we may get a wake-up call as a community, and then we'll be looking to partner with other people, back to Milton Hospital, Board of Health, and see what kind of steps we should encourage in the community. I think it just opens a lot of avenues for positive health initiatives. I think it's strong, and the nurses obviously feel that way.
The data will be very helpful.
The data
Thank
will
you.
be, although this will be baseline data,
Right.
so wouldn't be as valuable as we have
A
5
year,
years out.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mrs. Kelly?
So this is a mandate, or
is.
this is?
We
so-
bit the bullet last year. The mandate actually was supposed to start last year, but DPH backed off and said they would only mandate the communities that had received the enhanced school nurses grant. So the 115 communities, they have a report from last year, the data that they did. This year is the year everybody has to do it, regardless of if you are grant funded or not.
Thank you.
And as long as we have Margaret Gibbons here with us at the table, Margaret serves on our wellness committee chaired by Kristen Bagley-Jones, and wrote a grant to the Milton Hospital last year and was awarded that grant. We've referred to that. With our grant writer funded from the Milton Foundation for Education, Margaret Gibbons and a member of our PE health staff worked with Chris this summer and wrote a grant to the Carol White. And it was a sizable grant that, when I think about the art presentation, I think of what's happened in physical education and health. And it would have provided the much-needed funding to really bring back our programs. And we were not successful in that, and being awarded that grant on the 30th of September. A tremendous amount of work was put into that grant by Chris Malowski, Margaret Gibbons, and physical education and health staff. Again, it's very easy to say Situate was awarded the grant. It was their second time in. Chris Malowski has spoken to Situate and said that the edits and suggestions they gave were very successful. Andover was successful, and they went out twice. But we like to share our good news. We also want the community to know that we're out there with our grant writer trying to turn over every single leaf to enhance our school budget and enhance our programs. But
The Carol White grants continue, and what we learned after the
Term.
fact was that almost no one gets awarded it the first time out. So we didn't realize that at the time, and it was after we were told we didn't receive the award, then we did a little homework and found out that, oh, you silly people, you have to do it again, and maybe you'll get it then. So we will.
we were very hopeful, and what it
Dave
would have
Mazzulli was
done
invaluable in his contributions from
to the
phys ed
PE health
staff.
program would have been phenomenal.
Yeah, and
We'll
we'll
go out
do it
again.
again. We will do it again.
But I appreciate the effort that you put into that, and to that point, we were really hopeful that we were going to get that grant, and you put a lot of work into it.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. Next in my report, I'm going to ask Dr. John Drotter, our high school principal, to join us at the table. And again, in the fall, we share our MCAS results. Dr. Drotter is here tonight to share data regarding our SAT and advanced placement results and data, and share with the school committee and the public what we do with this data, how we follow the data, how it drives instruction, and how we work with our administrative leaders and teachers with that data. Dr. Drotter?
All right, just a moment, let me power up this.
Ms. Conley, do we have any materials?
This presentation was put off because Dr. Drotter, John Fallon, and I met yesterday with an individual from the College Board. So I have to tell you, Dr. Drotter worked through today on this, and he was very conscious, I said, of getting the materials to you. So we'll email you all the materials in the morning.
Great.
But he, from the College Board, they were actually emailing him data this afternoon, finishing the presentation for you this evening.
Like,
Why don't I keep going while you're doing that? Would that break the flow?
Yes, no, just keep going.
On my superintendent's report, many of the members have seen, I wanted to share that I've shared with the public and the school committee that we're into our coordinated, you ready? Our coordinated program review. This is the state coming out, evaluating the Milton Public Schools in the area of special education, English language instruction, and civil rights policies and procedures. It's a tremendous, and many school committee members have seen, a tremendous number of questions regarding our policies and procedures with 4, sometimes 10 supporting pieces of data. We had to involve the entire staff And I'll pick up on this after Dr. Drotta's presentation.
All right, thanks. You know, part of this is there's always, every time new data come in, we always try to take a look at it and say, what's it going to tell us and how it helps inform us for what we're doing. So in this one, we're just going to take at this moment with the SATs. Now, part of it is, these are our SAT averages. The blue is in reading, red math, and the writing's in like the cream color, and this is over the years from 2006, 2007, 8, 9, 10. On the end here is our, that's the state averages here. So, you know what, this is pretty sensitive here. I'm sorry, let me try to start it back here. Okay, actually, so it's the same thing. So these are our values over time. As we can see, there, in the next slide, what you saw before is I kind of focused on the difference from this last year to what the state averages are, because we've seen over the last couple years a little drops, some drops in the SAT averages. So this is in particular what I want to talk to everybody about tonight and put out there. That in general, I'd say if we look at over time, sometimes we're around the 520, we've gone up above it, down to it, but this is a bit of a drop from what we typically are for ourselves in our SAT averages here compared to the state. So, and that's this part right here. Let's see, this is 2010, you know, and it's a bit magnified. I'll try to, I don't know why that's jumping, I'm sorry, compared to this being the state averages for, again, reading, math, and writing. Okay, now when we see data, what I like to do is I like to take a look at it in some different formats. So I took a slice on this trying to say, okay, if we're falling, if something's drifting, where is it drifting and why? So I took and cut up the school in bands and deciles from where our strongest performers are down through the middle all the way down in as far as how they're performing in school and what the kind of, for those groups of students, what the SAT averages are. And in looking at this, to me, this is, again, we start over here. This is our strongest performers, and it kind of, so this is a normal, you know, drift downward, but we're looking at what this represents here, our scores over the last 3 years in particular. From what I would consider, we had a peak about 3 years ago, and we've drifted downward a little bit over the last couple. And when I look at our, you know, again, the strongest students, I see that here we have, well, we're still going up kind of and accelerating, but as I go over, sometimes we'll see a pretty much flat level performance, but there's a tendency right across the middle here, all the way down, of some kind of drift in each of our bands. And we're kind of show our students who might struggle the most on the SATs are kind of holding their own there over the course of time. This is for reading. If we look at the same thing, these are the percentile bands from the strongest in math over the years from 08, 09, and last year, 2010. Again, the top kids holding their own, but we see kind of that drift a little bit in the middle, and down at this kids that might struggle a little, we see holding their own and even improvement there over the last 3 years.
I
And
interrupted, John, so the school committee follows this? That the-
three of them, and then
Right.
I guess if my back's to you, we can interrupt and take a question. Just let me know. And here's our scores in writing. So part of this is, you know, what I'm looking at is saying, okay, if something's happening, what's happening, where's it happening, and who's it happening to? And doing this, then I'm looking at what are some of the factors. I looked at our class size over the last few years. We find that our, you know, senior class size, and again, this is, we'll say, just to qualify it, these are our senior classes, our graduating seniors, the SATs for them. And so here's our senior class size that, has been increasing over time. Last year was one of our largest senior classes with 272 students. When we increase the number of students we deal with, that increases variability. So, I look at that to consider. And I also look at, now this is from, I just copied it out of the stuff as Superintendent Gormley said. We met yesterday with a representative from the College Boards asking, can you give us more data so that we can look at things? This is on a copy of a handout that she had in it. Now, as we look at each of this, in this data, we are looking at the students that self-reported as minority students, and for our graduating seniors, 34%, self-reported as minority students, which is about what our school is, 34%. So we're reaching all of our minority students. Now, in a couple other slices, they also reported out, and this is a good one to look at. All right, sorry. The 26% here has to do, this is graduating seniors, but this is on SAT 2s. Now, I didn't track that, but this was just part of the chart that they provided. SAT 2s are a subject or content-specific test. So if you're going into an engineering school, or if you want to be a math major, science major, then you would take a content area test in that particular subject. So you could take a math SAT, just specifically math or science, whatever the sciences are, or physics or chemistry, foreign language students. So these are all that. But again, what we're seeing is a pretty healthy, 26%. It's not, we're improving and showing that we're getting more and more of our students, even our, 2B in SAT 2s and taking them. The 20% figure over here is with students taking APs. Again, for seniors taking APs, 20% of the students that took APs, self-reported as minority students, which isn't as much, but that's been a gradual improvement over time. It shows that more and more of our students are even getting involved in AP classes. This is 41% has to do with the PSATs and sophomores, and the 32% is juniors who took the PSATs. So that's a couple. But some of it, as I look at it and say, how are we performing? What do our numbers show us? So the numbers show us that we're very inclusive of all of our students. This is from the College Board, is a breakdown, a quick breakdown according to the fee waivers and free and reduced. So this would be kind of a way of taking a look at our low-income students. Milton High School has about 17% in students where they'd be classified as low-income on free and reduced lunch, where we're seeing that our SATs, PSATs, and APs are approaching that number. So again, we're getting all of our students to be participants. And I think, to me, that's one of the things that we take pride in, that we're inclusive. When we look at our SAT scores, in all our scores, we're talking about and trying to still work towards make it representative of our entire school. So what I decided to do is another way of helping me look at this is that across the state, and the woman from College Board said that, well, 78% of students take the SATs across the state. So most school systems, it's not everybody, but that's our story. We have 95, 98% of students taking the SATs. We're inclusive of our minority students, our low-income students. So that's a number that reflects a broader spectrum than we would see in just a state average. So I took, just for this last year, which was one of our ones that we had kind of, I would say, our weakest performance for ourselves, and I just pulled out the top 78% of kids and said this might be typical to compare apples to apples in this kind of setting. So in blue is the Milton High School scores representing our, what I would say our top 78% of kids, and that's compared to the state averages there. So the red are the state averages for this last year. The blue is kind of a slice that might be a little more representative to what a typical state number would be from our school, because you don't see, from other school systems, you don't see the depth of penetration that we have of all kids being involved. Here's, again, this is just a quick shot of our AP numbers. The dark blue are the number of students taking APs, which we can see is a steady rise. The lighter blue are the number of qualifying scores. Now, this is there are students who score 3, 4, 5. I'd say that, what we're doing is continue to expand and get more and more of our students involved in the highest level class possible. Our scores are a little flat on the blue, the light blue, the 3, 4s, and 5s, so we still have to look at that. This becomes kind of a, push-pull thing where we expand, we take in more students, and then we still have to, ramp up and still get them and get everybody to, if possible, get a qualifying score. And this is very telling, for, data from the College Board themselves. One of the best predictors of success in college is a rigorous program of study, exposure to an AP class or multiple AP classes, and a rigorous program of study, and students, not only their success, but their participation in these classes is an indicator of success in college. So, we look at that and recognize that I'd say we're making progress on some things, but we still have things to work on as we go forward.
And may I, John? The individual that we met with and the individuals that we've met with over the years really stressed to us yesterday, and this was an admission officer from Brown, who had been at Brown and Wellesley, how really the correlation to an advanced placement class, whether you were in a 3, 4, or 5, and the correlation to success in college. And what we talked about was, John and I and John Drotter and our leadership team, we evaluate ourselves by MCAS, by SATs, by AP enrollment, by 3, 4s, and 5s, that we have no dropout rate, the rate of students going on to college. But again, we have to look at all of these different views, and a huge goal at Milton High School and for the leadership team has been the enrollment, and to bring from what was years ago racially identifiable classes to really open up the advanced placement classes. The dark blue is really an achievement. Now we have to be sure that, again, when we increase the numbers, to maintain the 3, 4s, and 5s, and to see the increase over the next 2 years of students earning that college credit. So we've identified the areas in the SATs and the APs, and we shared with you the MCAS scores, the areas that, again, we're excelling in, and again, we're identifying the areas for you that we have to work on.
Can I just ask a question?
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
So the dark blue is the number of kids taking it, and the light blue are the number of kids who got a passing grade of 3, 4, or 5?
Well, the dark blue are the number of examinations. Some students will take multiple examinations.
Oh, they could take 2 or 3 or 4.
But we have that data for you, how many test takers and how many tests taken.
Okay.
So I went on to the DESE site, and I found, so I had to kind of, this didn't copy as well. This is on the DESE site, percent of juniors and seniors enrolled in at least one AP course, as we can see, and the percent. So Milton is in that red line that, here we are, Milton, and here's the state average. So when we look at that, when we're talking about juniors and seniors enrolled in an AP class, I think clearly we're way above and going higher. So this is kind of the percentage of kids, not the number of test takers. So I guess going forward, I wanted to put out some things because, I mean, we think of, and we know we're a high-performing school. We have tremendous success. We have seen some slippage in the last couple years. So, I think, changing, like increasing class sizes, number of students involved are some of the reasons, but going forward, what I hope to do and look at is, and maybe I'll say that I'll take some blame, and if I've been focusing too much on MCAS and not enough on the SATs, then shame on me. That I'd be adding, because we usually put out regularly both in English and math classes. In math, we call them block day problems. They're review problems for upcoming tests, and we'd focus more on the MCAS. So we're going to make sure we add to that, to those problem sets, SAT review problems, because to be honest, it wasn't there. That's one of the things I discovered, so I said we got to change that because we want to maintain our same SAT high standards. We're going to look at the SAT review classes that are offered. We want to judge their effectiveness, and we want to try to find a way to combat the attendance in it. We find that there's a good number of students who sign up for the classes, but sometimes, and that's because, as you saw, they lead busy lives, and they might be missing out of 8 or 10 classes, they'll be missing 4 or 5 of them, which we want to try to find a way to focus on that. We want to continue discussion of curriculum and course alignment. Big thing looking at both for MCAS and for SATs, looking at what we teach, when we teach it, how it's organized, what's the best way to deliver and coordinate and make sure that our timing is good, and that is the timing is appropriate for both MCAS and SATs and the APs. And we always do that department review of AP courses, because every department and every course that's done, the teachers get the scores and they look at how things happen. Did I get it? We see very strong performance in some areas that need to be worked on, and so on. So that's something that we always do for APs and that we'll continue to do.
Dr. Jada, John Savino has a comment. Could we pass a microphone down to him, please, Mrs. Kelly?
I just wanted to say that I think adding the SAT problems to classes is a good idea, because the College Board has their own particular way of asking questions that I think it's good that students have exposure to it.
Mr. Huban.
Having a senior, I have the collegeboard.com SAT question of the day sent to myself, and some of those are pretty difficult. But I think adding that would be wonderful to the to help the students along. And
Yes,
I generally score in the 60% range. So
No, and that's something that is very particular to the SAT. The SAT, that test is very, prep sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
You can make differences by prepping. And again, the bigger correlation that we look at for college, and our focus has been on a rigorous program of study. But you do want those SAT numbers too.
And if I might, to Mr. Huban's point, we run SAT prep classes, and at a very low cost, and we use our own staff, which we believe the parents recognize the teachers' names. And we have to tell you, the attendance has not been excellent. And as a team, we've been meeting, and we think that because the cost is low, the attendance isn't always 100%, and people aren't taking it seriously enough. So as a leadership group, we're going to meet and talk about, again, when we met with the individuals who teach the SAT, they know that you have to attend all of the sessions. And when I came to Central, I said that I wanted all children to be able to go to those sessions, again, so that you didn't have to pay the astronomical amount that people who go to private companies pay. But we're meeting as a leadership team, and we're going to work with a father, Steve Shapiro from Pinnacle Learning, and really try to take our SAT prep, and as John says, it's sensitive to that kind of prep before, and again, look for 100% attendance. I'll tell you, in the private companies, if you miss 2 or 3 classes, you're out. And so if you're going to gauge the success of their course, you have to go to all 10 or 20 sessions. you're not going to look for results if you only go to 7. And so we, as a leadership team, we have looked into that. Again, it's the whole program. It's just not the prep class, but they're all contributing factors.
Mr. Huban.
Along those lines, the administration just had the PSAT. Do you know what type of attendance that we had for that?
Well, that was a good news story this year. We give it in school, and the correlation to us giving the PSAT in school is that everybody is in the mode to take the PSAT and SAT, and we don't want the PSAT to be dependent on you or your family knowing enough to get into the mode of taking that test. So we give it in school. In the good news story, there were only 10 students absent on that day. So there was a huge celebration that, again, our goal is to expose everyone to everyone, to feel the ownership and to be in the course of study to attend college.
I think that's a good news story.
It was a really good news story at Milton High.
And so that would relate to a percentage of what attendance?
You
Mr.
see the
Math.
former math department head?
So 97% participation, approximately. That's great.
I'm sorry, I might know the size of my senior class. My sophomore class, I don't know how big.
That's okay. I just want to say, too, that I think that as a whole, the venture, the progress that you're making to have all students participate in both the PSAT and the SAT is huge for students. It sets a high bar for learning and accomplishment, and that's a wonderful thing in education today, and the rigorous program that you provide to support it. Yes, Mr. Phelan.
I'd just like to state that in the meeting that Dr. Drotter and Mary Goldman and I had with the woman from the College Board, she also stated how the advanced placement opportunities at the high school were extraordinary, and that is the pathway to success at the higher ed level. And when we talked a little bit about where Dr. Drotter presented the students and where they might be drifting, it was that middle group. And I think that the best target in the person from the College Board gave us this impression that if you open up the AP and you get those students exposed to that rigor, that your SATs will follow. So by opening up the AP program and encouraging and seeing more students take those exams, she feels, in her experience, that those SAT scores will follow. So Milton High is absolutely on the right path with AP coursework, rigor in the classroom, in the SAT scores, I believe, will follow with all the programs that are happening at Milton High. And again, it was great to have this College Board representative come in with her experience at Wellesley and at Brown. And when she says, and she's looking at Milton students coming in, she couldn't say enough about them. So I think that these are great avenues for our students to take advantage of.
Thank you. Ms. Bagley-Jones?
Dr. Drotter, I just had a couple questions for you. Class size in our regular classes versus AP class size, do you have a sense of those? When I was here for open house, I was sort of surprised at how large some of the classes were.
Do you want to turn around, Dr. Drotter?
Yeah, they want you on the TV.
Okay. The question about size of AP classes. I think some of our students could speak to how some of they find them, because they're...
Yeah, I'm curious.
Go ahead, please.
I feel as if our main classes, such as English and math, are bigger than more specific, but this year I'm in AP macroeconomics as well, and it's a very big class.
Like how big? What's big?
I'll say like that to 30. So,
Okay.
I think it also depends on the AP class too. Some classes are big just because there's a lot of people want to take them, and some of the really hard classes they aren't that big. So
I think John and Michelle say it exactly. It's variable according to enrollment, and we try to increase enrollment, and sometimes it will make for a very large class. But on the other hand, if you have something like an AP chemistry class, we'll still run it if there's 15 students in it.
Mhm.
So it'll be a smaller class than some. But generally, like mainstream, where we'll have a couple sections of English and math APs, they do tend to be larger.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
Another question before you turn around. So in terms of when students take the SAT, could you just reiterate when they're supposed to do that? Let me see if I know this correctly for myself.
This is, taking the SATs in math, the math SAT would be Algebra 1, Geometry, and some Algebra 2. So taking it, at the end of taking Algebra 2 would be an appropriate time. And now that could be junior year.
Got it.
That's one of the things we're looking at curriculum-wise is the alignment of what's taught and when, because that's very important in prepping somebody. I think John said it so well when he said SAT problems are a very specific animal, and so you want to be on that mode when you take the test. So we're looking at making some very firm recommendations in that matter,
That would be
too.
helpful. And one more question, if I can. And then Mr. Huban referenced collegeboard.com, which when I was sort of panicking around, oh, what should I be doing as a parent? That was a really helpful resource, but another parent told me about it. So is there a way to sort of think about, to our sophomore and junior and senior parents, to put out there really, this is what you should be doing right now with your kids, a timeline? Because kids go, I didn't know, right? No offense, but, sometimes that's their response, not from these two, but from other children, we know. So, really, parents either panic or sort of go in the denial mode, I'm finding. So what's a medium ground? Is it the College Board question every day? Or are there other things a parent should be doing now to get their kids ready? And that would be helpful, I think, to hear from you.
Yes, and we'll make sure this recommendation comes through the content area, through the English teachers and the math teachers,
Okay,
to discuss it with the classes specifically.
okay.
Because you want to make sure that you're ready, you should take it.
And I think, did
Something
John,
for
the student,
parents.
did you want to say something?
We'll let all the parents know. John?
Talk about it.
Well, just about, college research and knowing what to do, I feel like guidance does help a lot with that. It's just sometimes the timing of it. Some people like to start it earlier versus later, so that's really.
Mr. Phelan?
Just to echo on what school committee member John Savino said, is that the group guidance does have a curriculum that is specific to grade 9 curriculum, grade 10, grade 11, and 12. And that curriculum is making the students aware of, at their grade level, what things are coming ahead for them for their, if you're a freshman, what you should get ready for your sophomore year, when you're a sophomore, getting ready for SATs, and what you should be looking at for coursework. And so the guidance curriculum does prepare students. And I believe that there is a parent night that the guidance department puts on regarding college acceptance, college entrance, and the work that has to be done as seniors, that a lot of junior parents attend and are encouraged to attend as well.
Ms. Gormley?
And to the point Dr. Drotta spoke to, as a leadership team at the middle and high school, we're looking at the math curriculum. And when Dr. Drotta was preparing for this presentation, I said, this group is smart. I said the parent, guardian population are informed. So I would want to, in the spirit of being honest, tell you that Dr. Drotta will be coming back if our discussions 6 through 12, and we've even included the elementary math coordinator, we may be making some recommendations to you in the program of studies in December, January, before we go out to the parents. I'll tell you, we had a discussion the other day, and we asked your resident math specialist, professor, Dr. Pavlicek, to stay, and we had the leadership group, again, because Dr. Pavlicek understands math education from a global view, Breakthrough University, and we were looking for his endorsement, and he asked the right questions, and tomorrow we're meeting at Pierce Middle School. So we look to have, I said to Dr. Drotter, we want to explain to the school committee so they're not surprised when we come with some recommendations in the area of math that will drive instruction.
Anything else, Dr. Drotter? Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we'll put this on the web and send it to the school committee members tomorrow morning. Unless you want to edit more tonight.
Okay, Ms. Gormley?
I can defer if you want to bring Mr. Cocello forward now,
Okay.
and then
We're
I'll go
gonna-
back to the rest of my report.
We're going to go out of order because we're much later in our agenda, or not as, we're earlier in our agenda than we anticipated, so we're inviting Tony Cicallo to come and join us tonight. Tony's coming in the role of the Consolidated Facilities, Townwide Consolidated Facilities Chair of that subcommittee that Chris Huban and I have been sitting on for the past how long? 2.5 years? Yep, 2.5 years. So it has been a process, and there have been the other members of the committee. There are townwide members. There's a representative from the Board of Selectmen, it's Kathy Fagan, and she stayed on after she was not reelected, so she's been sitting on that, and we have townwide members. And it's been a real work in progress, and I would like to compliment and say a special thanks to Chris Huban, who has done a great deal of work on this on behalf of the school committee. So Tony comes tonight to share with us a memorandum of agreement that we met with the school committee met with the Board of Selectmen to look at this memorandum of agreement, and then it went back for more edits. And so, Tony, would you like to speak to the document that we have before us tonight?
I would, thank you very much. And again, I am here as the chair of the Consolidated Facilities Committee, but I do just want to mention that you, Ms. Sheridan, and Mr. Huban have been very active participants in the committee, on that committee since it began. I have to publicly thank Mr. Huban for his efforts this past summer to try to help us iron out some knotty issues and get this thing done. And I think we're at a point where we're ready to go. I also have to mention, in addition to you two and Ms. Fagan, Dick Williams, Jerry Cahalan, and Murray Regan have been instrumental on this committee, as well as Mary Cobb, who was with us for our first year. We've gone through a process of exploration, proposal, 2 town meetings, and I think we now have the final MOA that I hope you will be able to approve this evening. We have been tweaking it as we went along, and I apologize. I think we had tweaks come along as late as just yesterday on one item that Mary McGettrick had suggested we make a minor change on. I really think we are at a point where we've got a framework that's going to set us up for success. I don't want to minimize the challenges that are ahead of us. This is a substantial reorganization of town government and how we're doing things. And so we've had challenges to get to this point, but I think there's a lot more work to be done. If you approve it and the selectmen approve it tomorrow night, we're really just launching what's going to be an interesting adventure. I do hope that you will approve it. You all have seen this on a number of occasions. I think members of the public have seen it. What we're trying to do here is to create a new public facilities department that's a hybrid, in a sense. It's something that really hasn't, in some ways, been done before in town. It's trying to bring together the gap that sometimes arises between the school side of things and the town side of things, and help the town as a whole to most effectively manage the maintenance and care and upkeep of its buildings. And we need to do this on a day-to-day, short-term basis, but we also need to do it on a longer-term basis. Now, everybody thinks an effort like this should save money. I would love to say that it's going to save money, but I don't think that that should be our primary goal. If we do, great. What we need to focus on is 2 things. Number one, taking every dollar that we have that's available to use in these buildings to clean them, maintain the systems, and for capital, and use it most efficiently. I don't think we have enough dollars devoted in our budgets to doing these things now. I think we need to make every dollar that we have count and use it most efficiently, number one. Number two, we need to provide the information and the infrastructure so that we can effectively plan, and to the extent that we need more resources, help people understand what we need and why we need it. So the key person in this initiative is going to be the director of the Public Facilities Department, who's really going to spearhead this effort. The director of the Public Facilities Department is hopefully going to be someone who is a facilities management professional, someone who has the technical know-how and experience to effectively manage buildings and complex systems. That's number one. Number two, and at least as important, this person needs to be a very effective manager and a very effective communicator, because change is going to happen one way or the other. We seem to constantly be trying to do more with less. If you look at the staffing on the maintenance of the buildings over the years, it's done nothing but decrease, even though on the school side you increased your square footage by 50%. You didn't get more people to take care of that space. So we're going to have to figure out a way to do things better. So this public facilities director is going to apply professional management principles to managing all of these buildings. Hopefully we get some synergies by working across town and school departments. And in order to effectuate all that, this person is going to have to be a very effective communicator and manager, because there are a lot of stakeholders involved. There are a lot of different departments. There are a lot of different citizens, and there are a lot of different employees that are going to be impacted by all this. And so this is going to be a process that's going to roll out over time. Now, this public facilities director reports, and this is where things get interesting, reports jointly to the superintendent of schools and the town administrator. And it's designed to be a hybrid system where this person needs to be responsible to both of those customers. And so the superintendent of schools and the town administrator will really be providing the direction and the goal setting and that type of thing for your committee and the Board of Selectmen for this person and the department. We've gone through a number of drafts. We made some changes. We've had the school council review it. Maybe even more important, we had Bern Lovely review it. And he, cleaned up the draft and made some very good suggestions that we've incorporated, and that was many of the changes that you saw in the most recent drafts. So I think the document really sets out the framework that will set this thing in motion. If you approve this quickly, our next steps, what we need to do is get the director. That's the key person. So we've identified the process and a rough time frame of how we want to do that. First, we're going to get advertisements out as quickly as possible for this person. We have a whole list of periodicals and different places that we're going to be putting these advertisements. We hope to have the applications in by the end of November. Then begin a process with a screening committee. The screening committee is going to be, at this point, the plan is the Consolidated Facilities Committee plus the superintendent and the town administrator. And that committee will go through a process to take, hopefully, many applications and bring them down to to a certain number of finalists, semi-finalists, or sort of, who will be interviewed, and then down to 3 or 4 people that were really the top candidates, and then the superintendent and town administrator will make their choice subject to the review and approval of the school committee and the Board of Selectmen. Once we get that person in place, he or she has a lot of work to do all of the things that we've been talking about. I've talked for a long time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
It's helpful, Tony, that you gave the timeline. I was going to ask you to do that for next steps. So our vote is tonight, and the Board of Selectmen are voting on this tomorrow night.
Exactly.
And then the Consolidated Facilities Committee gets going again, so. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
So that's a motion to accept this memorandum of agreement. Is there any discussion? Mr. Huban.
I have 2 things. First is, a late addition to this MOA, which came out yesterday morning, calls for the capital plan to include energy use and recommendations pertaining to energy efficiency. That's not been required or asked of any other town departments in the past. Is that something that we believe that would be asked and required of all town departments through the capital planning committee?
It seems to me that absolutely should be done. Now, I don't control, and frankly, you don't necessarily control what the capital planning committee wants. But at this point, every department in town would be participating in this consolidated facilities process except the park department and the cemetery department initially. I would recommend that the capital planning committee ask those two departments for the same information. It's really critically important when you're looking at capital expenditures that you consider utility costs, utility conservation measures in whatever systems that you're looking at and whatever capital planning they're doing. I know the school department spent a lot of time on that, and I think they've had some great success with these new buildings in getting their buildings rated Energy Star efficient, that type of thing. I think that's critical to the long-term operational costs of the building, and so I think that should be applied across the board. I think that one of the things that we hope to do here is really revitalize the Capital Planning Improvement Committee, giving them better information and the kind of information they need to really advocate at town meeting for the resources that we need on the capital side.
Mr. Huban?
One last question. Just publicly, so everyone is familiar with this, you are confirming tonight that with the exception of the cemetery and the Parks Department and maybe a couple of people in DPW, that all other town departments will be included in this?
The buildings, all the town's buildings except those under the control of the park department and the cemetery board. At this point, now, keep in mind that to my knowledge, the library trustees have not voted formally to include themselves in this process. I mean, they took a vote last spring, and frankly, I don't remember exactly what it was. They were very supportive of it. They've told us they want to be involved in this, but they may feel the need to take another vote once the two operative committees here adopt the MOA. Every indication we've had from them is they do want to be included in this process, and they think that's going to be very helpful for them in managing their new library building.
Thank you.
Mrs. Kelly?
There were two questions from previous discussions on this that I just want a clarification on. On page 2, regarding the Corey standards, there was a question as to whether there's a wording in there excluding snow plowing, and I just questioned whether that was our present policy, or I think the way I described it before was, the entire parcel of the Milton Public Schools or the Milton High School is under the jurisdiction of the Milton Public Schools, and therefore having a quarry exemption for someone who would still be doing work on that property doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I think I'd raised that question and had hoped to get some clarification on it.
Two things. My understanding is that this is consistent with current policy, number one. And number two, I think the way that we've drafted this, the most restrictive policy would be applicable. So, for example, if the school department or the school committee were to adopt a policy that required anybody on the grounds, including snowplow personnel, to have a quarry, then that would become applicable.
That's consistent with what Joe Emerson has reviewed, and he's fine with that.
So presently, I guess I would just ask a question. Do our snow plowers, are they quarried right now or no?
No, when the town comes in, then they're not quarried by us.
So I guess maybe what Mrs. Kelly's asking is there a differentiation between the plows that the DPW sends to do our main roads or the custodial staff who plows the sidewalks and driveways?
Really, it's a blanket question. The quarry is there for a reason. I would think anybody working on our grounds would have to fall under that jurisdiction. That's just my interpretation. I don't have any legal background to back that up. I guess I just want to question whether, if we delineate right here that there's an exemption for a certain group of people, is that the right way to go? I guess that's my only question.
Mrs. Kelly brings up a point. I don't know if I knew the answer. I see no reason why the snow plowers would be exempt. I don't believe they go out and contract to do our grounds. We either do our grounds or DPW people come. Do you think you contract, the town contracts out?
We do.
Town contracts out for a lot of snow
Yeah, we
plowing.
do.
So if
I
they
don't know
do,
whether they do physically our grounds, but they contract out for a lot of snow plowing.
well, if they do contract out, that's why they would have exempted from the town side. And to this point in quarries, we spent a long time with Joe Emerson, our attorney, and we have the highest bar, and everybody employed by this department would have to live by our bar. So, again, the only thing that I can think of with the snow plows would be if they contracted out, then you couldn't, you wouldn't have them quarry if they weren't employees of the town. Matt, would you agree?
No, that, I'm fully in accord with your understanding. When the DPW contracts out for vendors to help them snowplow to get all the town roads clean, then they assign those folks different areas. It's possible they could assign a vendor to plow out some of the school grounds because we can't do all of that work ourselves. But it's probably more often going to be one of the school employees or the town employees that are going to be on our grounds. But the purpose of the Corey check is for anybody that could be alone with children. And somebody that's driving a plow truck is not likely to be alone with kids, especially when they're plowing. Most of the time, the kids aren't here yet. So it seems to be a reasonable exception not to hold the DPW or this Consolidated Facilities Department not to have to Corey snowplow drivers because they could work around it with assignments pretty easily.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Mrs. Kelly?
And then just one other thing was the fees that were deposited into school revolving accounts for rental fees. We had a question as to how we would, I guess, spend that money, because essentially, if the maintenance of buildings was now being under the control of the other department, would there be requests for transfers, or how would that be working? Do we have any insight into that?
I don't know that we've worked out the practical mechanism for doing that, but I believe that could easily be worked out one way or the other, whether it's an interdepartmental transfer or how that would be worked out. But again, I think that's not something we need to implement today. I think it's a point that somebody will have to take a close look at once they start implementing.
Mr. Huban, would you like to speak?
The way it's always been discussed is that the way the revolving account is set up now is the way it would continue. That's the way it's always been discussed. So if money came in from renting the field house, the money would be spent on the field house.
So the revolving account would not go to the Consolidated Facilities, to the Public Facilities Department?
It may, but it would be spent in accordance with the way the revolving account was set up.
Mr. Pavlicek?
Yeah, I think the issue is, for instance, if the facilities department has to pay overtime to custodians to be in the field house during a rental or something like this, it would seem reasonable that that money could be transferred to their department for purposes of paying the overtime on custodians. But I mean, that's still within the mission of the current revolving account. It's just the money is being paid initially from a separate place, and so instead of reimbursing our custodial line item, it may be reimbursing a custodial line item somewhere else or something like that.
Mr. Gillis?
All the revolving funds have a law that enables them and regulations as to how and where the money can be spent. So rental of school facilities, there's a specific statute for that. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but there is one. And it limits how you can spend those funds. So they can't take that money and pave Main Street. They can take it to put it back into the facility, whether it be custodial or maintenance or utilities or overhead, but they can't take the money and just do something else with it. The Department of Revenue might have something to say about that.
Are there any further questions?
I just want to say that on behalf of the schools, this process was very inclusive. Tony Cocello speaks about the committee, but the town administrator and I were active members. Every one of our questions, opinions, concerns were incorporated into this MOA. We feel very responsible. As a superintendent, I should feel that we have the biggest buy in this, but we also know, Mr. Cocello and all of you have seen us through the school building project, and we know that something has to be done, and we have a responsibility for the next generations to take care of these buildings. So it's a creative idea. I look to Mr. Hubian, who, when negotiations were breaking down and we had so many issues, that he brought it around to a compromise and made sure that with Mr. Cocello, this was going to work with all the committee members. And so on behalf of the schools, we do have a huge responsibility. We heard tonight about art, and then Tony Cocello says our maintenance department has also been reduced, and we want to make sure that for generations these buildings are kept up and maintained, and we never as a town get in the situation that we'll need $140 million or $150 million school building project. And so I want to thank you, the committee, and on behalf of the schools, we're looking to work with the town, again, to preserve these buildings. And you listen to every one of our prioritizing the students, the programs, the staff, and we're willing to work with everybody to make this work.
Thank you.
Ms. Gormley, will I take that as your recommendation?
I feel as much ownership as they all do in this, absolutely. And again, it was, I don't think that the town and anyone can understand all the work that this committee, represented by Linda Lee Sheridan, Chris Hubian, and Tony Cocello, and the other members have put into this, and willing it through to make it work. And again, it's outside the box. You did a lot of research across the state, and we've got a huge investment in these buildings. The town has a huge investment, but we have a huge investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pavlicek?
Just one procedural thing on the MOA. Generally, as a school committee, we don't all sign agreements. And wouldn't it be reasonable for the motion to read to authorize the chair to sign on behalf of the school committee? Because that's what we do at school building committee. Certainly all the contracts that we sign are generally signed by the chair on behalf, rather than chasing 6 signatures all over the place. It makes more sense to authorize the chair to sign on our behalf once we take the vote. Just a suggestion for the maker of the motion. Whoever
that
that
a
might have
motion?
been. No, I'm
A friendly amendment? Just to change?
suggesting it to the maker. If he doesn't want to do it, that's fine with me.
Friendly amendment accepted?
Any further discussion? Any further discussion on the MOA? So, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Chicolo. Thank you, Tony.
And Chris and Linda Lee, thank you.
Thanks so much, Tony. You're almost out of a job for this one now. You just have to get out of the school building committee job. Yeah. Thank you. Ms. Gormley.
Just finishing this report, very important to the school district, the coordinated program review. So we've had delivered to DESE our responses yesterday. We're in close correspondence with the representative who's going to be bringing the team out to the Milton Public Schools in November. For 3 days, the team will come out and they will go over special ed and ELE records of individual children, going over every time a request was made, testing, procedures, making sure that we're meeting all of the regulations. They'll then come out the next week for 3 days, and they'll be interviewing staff, support staff, parents. We've put out in the Patriot Ledger and the Milton Times an invitation to parents who would like to speak with representatives. We'll put it on the web tomorrow, the information. So we are, again, I said the other day, there's a reason they only come every 6 or 7 years. It's a tremendous amount of work, but it's outstanding to make sure that your policies and procedures are in place, and to have an outside agency that visits every school district over that 7 years come in. So we're looking to the next month, and I appreciate the work of the entire district responding to all these demands for information. So I wanted to bring you to an update on that.
Ms. Gormley, before you move on to that, I'm really appreciative that you brought that up, because I don't know if there's a way to capture how many hours, man-hours, have been spent on this program review. It is a great thing that an outside agency comes in and does this review to holds us accountable on a very high level, very high standards. But I think it's important for the community and the school committee to know how many hours. I mean, so we're looking at leadership team, we're looking at teachers, we're looking at parents. Hundreds of hours, Ms. Gormley?
Yes, we'll report out. We can make an estimate the next time.
It's just been amazing to see. So I thank everyone on behalf of the school committee that's been involved in this too.
Ms. Sheridan's going to report out on the Swing for Sports that we attended the culmination of yesterday, and some of us golfed in it. One of us golfed in it,
One of us golfed in it, Mr.
golfed in it all
Cohen.
day. Right, Mr. Cohen? You represented the committee golfing
Yes, I
in the
did.
Swing for Sports.
Yes.
Again, I know the night is getting late. Last Friday, Mr. Phelan and I attended what's the highlight of the school year. The Pierce started a 280 Club luncheon. And all of the students who have earned a perfect score on their English MCAS or their math MCAS at the Pierce School, they have a lovely luncheon reception, and we go, we speak, and we attend. And we had one young woman who earned a perfect score in both her English and her math. I would go over their names tonight, but I'll feature them on the front of the webpage and in my email blast. I also want to recognize tomorrow morning, I'll be giving remarks at our National Honor Society induction for Milton High School. Tomorrow morning, that induction will happen right here. I'll feature those students' names, and we can congratulate them on the web and in my email blast. I want to bring everybody's attention to this Saturday night. The Milton High School Athletic Hall of Fame will have their 4th annual induction ceremony at 5:30, open to the public right down in the field house. The names will be unveiled, all the families will be there, and then the group will move to Lantana's for a dinner and an induction ceremony that is very, very moving. All of these graduates come back, and it's all alive in that basketball game or that football game or that race or that team. It is an amazing, amazing night, and I have to recognize briefly, you have to indulge me, Mike Goodless, Dennis Duggan, Tom Herget, John Blake, Margaret Gibbons, Gary Kelly, Sean Walsh, Richard Ryan, and Sean McDonough. They make it work. They put a tremendous amount of work into this. So if you're free at 5:30 Saturday night, you could come to the field house and just see the ceremony. If you're interested in attending, you can contact Mike Goodless at Milton High School, and we'll list all of the award winners on the web and in my email blast. Circle your calendars for the 12th annual Monster Dash, sponsored by the Milton Foundation for Education, in the memory of Sam Cocello, Tony's son, who attended the Tucker School. And in memory of Sam, this event happens every year, and the proceeds go to science in the elementary schools. So circle your calendar for the Monster Dash on, it's actually
Sunday on
Halloween
Halloween
Day.
this year.
Sunday, October 31st, 11:30, but you can go on the web and get the registration information. An unbelievable event. Also, circle your calendar for Friday, November 5th at 7 o'clock, or Saturday at 6, on the 6th at 2, or 7 o'clock at night. Anything goes. If you want to get a little taste of 50 Milton High School students down the end, are you any of the tap dancers, or do you have friends who are tap dancers? Is it true that 50 Milton High School students learned how to tap dance for this show? Have you heard that rumor?
Yes, I saw them.
John Phelan will testify to it. So, anything goes, a drama presentation at Milton High School, so circle those dates, the weekend of, the 5th. At our last meeting, you had asked for update data on our diversity report. Mr. Phelan's briefly going to speak to that data that was in your packet for tonight, and Mr. Phelan's going to speak to the field trip update. I brought tonight, but I'll put it on the web, Steve Tracer, our athletic director, was very proud to send an update, but I know the hour is getting late. I'll put it on the web tomorrow, and when he comes to do his athletic presentation, I'll make sure he gives us this update, recognizing our high school athletes in every one of the teams. If I might, Mr. Phelan, on the diversity data and the field trip approval, please.
Thank you, Superintendent Gormley. In your packets, there are two inquiries at our presentation of the diversity report. One was the breakdown across the state in some similar communities to Milton in terms of the staff hiring and of each of the schools in the surrounding communities. We provided that for you along with their student demographic data. We will be reporting out on the university demographics of teachers who graduate and are certified, which represents the question that was the pool of candidates that we have to choose from. I would like to say that we did review this material with the folks from CDM at our monthly meeting that was held just the following week, and discuss this data as well as we prepare for our Citizens for Diverse Milton district-wide meeting, which is on the 28th of October. So if anybody has any questions about that data, we can answer those questions. I provided for you in your packets the field trip policy along with the addendum that we approved last year. The hope was that we were able to provide an annual list of field trips that teachers and students and families could plan on happening in ensuing years. The purpose for that was that we would be able to allow families to save if they had knowledge that a trip would be coming up each year or every other year, and that students could prepare and fundraise, and that teachers could make plans in advance to get the best rates and best prices available for our students as they go on these worthwhile trips. So as a group, this school committee passed an addendum, and attached to that addendum was a list of trips that we considered to be, quote, annual field trips. Part of that policy was to represent which of those trips are actually going to take place this school year, and to provide any information if it was different from the original proposals, give or take some of the financial costs that may go up or down with the types of flights and arrangements that are made. Essentially, in the packet that you have, it outlines which trips are going to be held this year, and which trips have any, if any, differences in the vendor price, dates traveling, days schools missed, or fundraising capacity. I have to say that I want to give you an updated list. I have one more trip that came in over the weekend that was not given to me or reported by me earlier. It's the music trip. Essentially, what we're asking is that you okay this trip, these bodies of trips that have already been identified as annual field trips. This annual field trip information dated October 20, 2010 outlines the previously approved trips, and their agendas were approved in a general way year to year. I asked the sponsors of the trips to outline if there was any difference in the amount of school days missed, the price to the student and families, the vendor that they are using, the dates traveled, and the fundraising opportunities offered. As you can see, we have our annual trip to Washington, D.C. That is going this year for our middle school 8th graders, Quebec City by our French students at the middle school level. Our middle school France trip does not happen on this year. It's an off year. It will happen the following year. And our Costa Rica trip is not going out from Pierce this year. Our France trip that is from the high school will be happening this year. Our Europe trip that happens annual from the high school is going out this year. Our music folks will take their annual trip this year, and this year they are going to Cleveland. That is a rotating trip that is out of state. And our hockey team that does a trip, which is a college weekend trip that rotates in its location, also is going out this year. If anybody has any questions about, just as the reminder of why we have this annual addendum in this reading, is so we, again, can give teachers and families and students more time to prepare, save their money, and send these students on a quality trip.
And also provide fundraising.
A long-term fundraising plan for students to be able to access the trip.
So could I just ask a question on the price where it says same? Do we have an idea of what that number is?
When I do not, I did put down the ones that the people that did offer the price. I know that the Washington DC trip is around $600 to $700. The Quebec trip was around $300, but I can get those exact numbers for you.
I think that would be helpful.
The Quebec trip is 500, and I believe 100's due by November 1st. I think you said the France trip was 2,200 last year, is 2,500 this year.
And I will get the Washington DC trip information for you for price.
And the hockey trip as well.
And the hockey trip.
Move we approve the annual field trip list.
Second.
Discussion? Mrs. Kelly?
I truly appreciate this list. I think it's the first time we're seeing a chart like this. So I think having the exact price, I mean, it would be very helpful. I think understanding what the dollar amount of fundraising potential would also be important, so that we can sort of make some comparisons. I, have strong objections to kids missing school for field trips. And quite frankly, for teachers being, out of the classroom for those days as well. So I think this is a great move forward in terms of getting all the details, but I would be voting against it.
Okay, I can provide those too.
Any further discussion? Yeah, I think in the past that we've talked about the fundraising offered, to give us a sense of just what the potential is to raise there would be really helpful. And also so that we know that there's not overlap in what that fundraising might be in terms of, I know that certain of these groups, the music group usually does a fruit fundraiser, just to make sure that there's no overlapping of any of those would be helpful as well, so. So do we feel prepared to vote on this, not having all that information? Yes, Mr. Pavlich.
Just one other thing too, that I know some of these have scholarship opportunities as well. I mean, if you're sending a certain number of people on these trips, I know there are occasions where they include a certain number of scholarship opportunities with them too. It'd be nice to know that as well in terms of, what the opportunities are when we're talking about fundraising.
Okay.
If I might, to Mrs. Kelly's point, it is outstanding to have all this in one place, and I've heard the high school principal, each one of these has to be cleared, and he is very conscious of the field trips that do happen during the school day, and very conscious that he doesn't want anybody missing one school day for a field trip. So I think that if we look at this over the years, that message has gone into the high school loud and clear, but there's always room to improve.
And I believe the only trip that has with a substantial amount of days is the France trip, in which our students will be in school in France for those 5 days. So that is a somewhat of a balance for that aspect of the trip.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the field trip information or slate? Opposed? And so that's 5-4 and 1 against. Did you get that? Ann, sorry.
The next is a traditional trip because it's not on the annual list of trips. This will be a first reading of this trip. It is our debate team, which is a club that began last year with a great success. I believe one of our school committee high school members is on this debate team. Is that correct, Mr. Savino? Excellent, well done. The debate team from Milton High will be competing at the George Mason University debate tournament in Washington, D.C. Their mentor teacher is Nick Fitzgerald. They will miss 1.5 days of school, so they can travel to Washington DC by van and return on a Sunday evening. The cost is $229. There will be some auxiliary costs to that as well. And there's a full agenda of what will happen over the weekend. The invitation to the Patriot Games Classic is provided by Mr. Fitzgerald, the sponsor and debate coach, as well as a breakdown of the price and the schedule and the travel and the accommodations in the back. Again, this is only a first reading, so if there's anything that someone would like me to add to this or request more information, I can go back to Mr. Fitzgerald and seek that information for you.
Mrs. Kelly?
And I do. It's regarding the use of a van for travel.
Mhm.
Is that a van that would have a driver that the field trip would? Because we do have a policy that says the use of vans or private automobiles for trips planned to include late night or overnight student travel should generally be avoided.
Mhm.
I don't know whether that falls in that category, but it recommends that such trips should generally use commercial motor coaches. Again, I'm not sure if one of the chaperones is planning on driving, if it's, you're renting the van, or how that all works, how insurance would be covered so that the Milton Public Schools would be held harmless.
Mhm.
So those would be the questions that I'd like to get more details on.
I can get back to you with the details on that, work things out with our insurance company.
John, do you know the answer to that?
I know some of the answers. The van, the reason we're using a van specifically is because if we're going down to DC, we're gonna need the van to be flexible because depending on how far our teams progress, we could be leaving at different times Sunday. So if we have a motor coach or anything with that type of a concrete schedule, it's gonna be very difficult to work that Sunday out because of that.
John is correct. Mr. Fitzgerald and I met. We talked about flying. We talked about taking the train. We talked about taking a scheduled bus. We talked about him driving and renting a van. And it did come down to, as John Savino says, the ability to not have transportation that's flexible down in D.C. to get back and forth between the hotel and the university and the other places that they will go. We will have a report on the insurance, as Member Kelly asked, and the travel arrangements in terms of the traveling at night, but it was going to be a van that was driven by the debate coach, and the insurance we'll give you an update on.
And if I might, to this debate team, last year, when they began, they used the Council on Aging van. And I want to recognize the Council on Aging for letting the team every 8 or 9 Saturdays use the van. And
Locally.
we took care, excuse me?
That was locally? They
Yes,
did.
locally.
Yeah.
And,
In the state.
And Mr. Savino being on the team, last year, just starting out, expectations were would get out there and just get exposed. And they broke in and actually placed several times. Mr. Savino at the end is shaking his head and he's modest. And we should also recognize Milton Academy has a very successful team, and their coach really helped you get going last year, but you're off and running on your own. So this is unbelievable, the second year that you would be competing at the Nationals, and you're to be congratulated with your coach and every one of you for the time you put into this. But we'll get all the particulars about the field trip.
Mr. Pavlicek?
Just a question on the timing. Normally, we do the 2 readings and approve it. This is a beginning of December trip. Will an approval of this trip at our next school committee meeting be in sufficient time to make all the preparations
Yes, it
and
would.
so forth?
Yeah.
Good call. Good catch. Thank you. Thank you for that information. We'll put this on the agenda for next meeting as well. Thank you.
Do we have to have a vote on the first reading? No.
We don't have.
No vote on the first reading? Just a first reading?
Just first reading.
Thank you.
Ms. Gormley, anything else?
No, and you did the diversity.
Correct.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'll begin by just saying I represented the school committee at 2 really great events in the past week. One was Swing for Sports, and there are a few people just to thank for that. John and Karen Davis Laura Phelan, Karen Russian, and Kara Russo, Kevin Walsh, Wollaston Golf Course, and Byrne Lovely of the Lovely family, Curry College, and Ken Quigley, the president, who provided all of the food. It was an incredible day of tennis and golf as people were swinging and fundraising for the Milton schools. There were wonderful auction items. I think I got a couple things. And it was just a really fun day, positive spirit around, and it was just a great event for our teams. Many people benefited from it, and of course the boosters who are there every step of the way. So thank you to all of those people. The other event that I had the pleasure of going to was for Collycott School. It's a one school, one book event, and it was really a wonderful fundraiser for a great event that they have that's being held in honor of a parent, Jennifer Kelly, who passed away very suddenly last year, and they're doing this event in her honor. It was something that she worked for, so it was a great way to continue her dream and honor and spread good reading skills and strategies in family time for the Collycott School. So I'll move on now to our calendar, and I don't think we have to take a formal vote on this. I just want to identify a couple of the changes that weren't on it the last time it was presented to you. I apologize. So as you see, our meetings will continue on Wednesday evenings right through till June. And in the month of December, we have only one meeting on December 8th. January, we will have 3 meetings. One of those will be to vote on our budget. In February, we're missing the February vacation, and in March, again, we have 3 meetings, one of which is our open budget hearing in the middle of the month, as we've done in the past. That's held in the high school auditorium. When we switch to April, we have 2 meetings, the second one, which will be after the town election, so it's not the 1st and 3rd, it's really the 1st and 4th of that month, because we need to have our school committee reorganization meeting. And then the beginning of May, we have town meeting. And June 1st, which would have been our first meeting of the month of June, actually falls during that week of graduation events. And so it's just, I think Wednesday night is the boosters night, and that wouldn't work for us. So we're switching to the next week, and you'll notice that there are back-to-back dates there. The first one is not a meeting, but rather our volunteer reception, which was held last year at Cunningham Collycott. And so June 8th will be our first meeting in June, and then our retreat will be on June 15th. So, check this with your calendars and see if that works for everybody, if there are any challenges or problems that you find. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. At this time, it's my honor to give the school committee's evaluation of Superintendent Mary Gormley. The children and families of the Milton Public Schools and the townspeople of Milton are extremely fortunate to have Miss Mary Gormley as their educational leader. She is a tireless educator who selflessly strives to live by and promote very high standards while achieving the goals that she sets for herself and the system. Miss Gormley's self-evaluation details all of the components of running a school system. It demonstrates great transparency of our schools, the administration, and her work with the community, and should be a blueprint for all evaluations going forward. In the role of superintendent, Ms. Gormley has many strengths. She has developed an outstanding leadership team that works collaboratively. By emphasizing the area of mentoring and development of new teachers, she has increased the hiring and retention of talented teachers and administrators to the district. As the educational leader, Ms. Gormley strives to support all students. In our schools, she has supported the inclusion of 97% of students with special needs in regular and inclusion classrooms. Working very closely with the special ed department, she has reduced the number of out-of-district placements from 54 to 46, which allows students to stay in their neighborhood schools while also saving the district significant dollars. Using student data to help inform decisions, the leadership team, under Ms. Gormley's direction, focused on the improvement of writing, and specifically open response questions to help improve performance on the MCAS. The Collycott Elementary School was commended for their high growth in the 2010 Massachusetts Accountability Status of MCAS. Collycott is one of 63 schools in the Commonwealth commended for high growth based on several criteria. Ms. Gormley's support of students does not end when the bell rings at dismissal. She has supported the creation of a mock trial club and debate team at the high school. And with the support of the Milton Foundation for Education, the Milton Public Schools began a highly successful Saturday program for students in grades 5 to 8 last winter. Ms. Gormley ardently wants to abolish the need for student fees for clubs and activities and lower the cost of athletic fees. In an effort to work towards that goal, Ms. Gormley spearheaded the very successful Banner program, which continues to grow. In working with the school committee, Ms. Gormley tends to every detail, including thorough communication and thoughtful preparation before school committee and subcommittee meetings. In addition to attending the many subcommittee meetings, she also attends meetings of the Milton Foundation for Education, Consolidated Facilities Committee, School Building Committee, regional meetings of the Charms Collaborative, Milton Heads of Schools, which is the private, public, and parochial schools in town, and town hall department head meetings. She has an incredibly positive working relationship with all of these groups, as well as with President Ken Quigley from Curry College and Mary Ann Sullivan from the Council on Aging. She has been described as having a big heart and demonstrates an openness and willingness to help all. Superintendent Gormley takes very seriously her responsibilities of fiscal oversight for the Milton Public Schools. She pays careful attention to tax dollars, balanced by the understanding that her primary goal is to take care of the school children. When the stimulus money became available last year, not many school districts in the state used the funds as conservatively as Milton, giving us funding for 2 years instead of just 1. Ms. Gormley's positive relationship with the Milton Teachers Union was the reason we were successful in renegotiating their current contract at a savings to the schools and a raised schedule of 2.5%, 2%, and 2.25% for the next 3 years. She has improved transparency of the Milton Public Schools fiscal reports, and because of her great communication, people have a high level of trust in her and in the Milton Public Schools. The school committee would like to suggest a few topics for Ms. Gormley to consider this year: the implementation of an integrated payroll and personnel system, evaluation of the school choice program, which is already underway, development of a system to stagger implementation of initiatives, and continued support for the fundraising efforts of the Milton Foundation of Education. The school committee appreciates the many talents and skills that Ms. Gormley brings as the superintendent of schools. Ms. Gormley's years of service to the Milton Public Schools and her tireless work ethic shows dedication and commitment to the schools and the town. Thank you, Ms. Gormley. So, yes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kelly?
Chairman Sheridan, I'd like to commend you on your compilation of all our comments. It was very well done. Thank you.
Thank you. So this was a new process for us this year, having our comments discussed in open session at our last meeting and me compiling them and presenting them tonight. And the next step in this process is for us to approve the goals that Ms. Gormley has set for next year. And in looking at these goals, we, meaning Ms. Gormley and I, spent some time looking at the MASC and the MASS guidelines or suggestions or recommendations for goals for superintendents. And in addition to those, some goals that Ms. Gormley had come up with. So these are just suggested goals, and I think that this is open for discussion here for us to accept or modify give some input to Ms. Gormley. This isn't a formal document, this is her recommendations, and this should be a discussion for us. So at this time, I'd like to just open it up to the committee for your comments and thoughts. Maybe, should I read
Move the
them?
goals as written.
Maybe should I read them?
Later.
Okay, the suggested goals are as follows. 1, to continue to improve student achievement and close the achievement gap. 2, demonstrate effective instructional leadership. 3, demonstrate effective organizational leadership. 4, demonstrate effective administration and management. 5, continue to work collaboratively with the Milton School Committee and communicate the budget needs of the Milton Public Schools to the community. And 6, continue the best practices of communication and public relations. So we have a motion to accept these. Do we have a second?
It's already out there.
Second.
I'm sorry. Okay. No, I said we have a motion. I just need
Oh,
a
I'm
second.
sorry.
Mrs. Kelly?
And I apologize to Superintendent Gormley because I didn't have a chance to talk to her about these before, but, you know, to me, establishing like 2 or 3 goals that are up here, that are very specific, that may have activities underneath them that can be measured in terms of, you know, what you'd like to attain with the, you know, to get to those goals, I think are a great model of sort of moving organizations and systems forward. And so I guess, you know, under that, I think we talked about this last year, was especially under improving student achievement, to you know, really let's target some things. Or even, it maybe doesn't have to be totally improving student achievement. Maybe, you know, some of the issues that were brought up at Citizen Speak in terms of how we're, you know, how we're breaking up the offerings that we're offering kids. You know, what are there 2 or 3 things that we really want to grab and really try and attain? And I think that we, you know, that establishing something like that might be useful, because I think, quite frankly, that most of these things, Ms. Gormley, as exemplified by your review, does these all the time anyways. And so let's maybe try and focus in on a couple things that would really, that, you know, that we feel would really move the system forward. I guess that would be my recommendation.
Thank you for those comments, Mrs. Kelly, because Ms. Gormley and I really struggled with some of these, and that's exactly the comment that I made to her. You know, when it says demonstrative, effective organizational leadership, well, by virtue of saying demonstrate, it makes me feel that she isn't already demonstrating. So we struggled with those, but again, we were trying to pull all the goals together from the recommendations that we were receiving. Ms. Gormley.
And to Mrs. Kelly's point, using the MASS and MASC, how superintendents are evaluated across the state, I can, for the next meeting, take 2 or 3 of these, and once you approve them, then I'd come up with sub-goals underneath each category. So for the next meeting, I could, as the time is going, it would still be October, at the beginning of November, come up with 2 or 3 and detail 5 goals, 3 to 5 goals under each of those.
Or action steps.
I'd find that very manageable and a beneficial experience.
So, Ms. Gormley, would you like to choose those 2 and present them to us, or how would you like to proceed at this time?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a friendly amendment to change the motion.
We could just table this motion
Do you want
until
to just table the motion?
next time.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
Can I just ask a question? So she's going to take these 6 and come up with
Just 2 or 3,
2 or
not
3
do
of
6.
these?
Yes.
Okay. Can I just ask for rewarding of number 1? Continue to improve student achievement and prioritize the closing of the achievement gap. I think you do great things, but I don't think you alone can close the achievement gap. But you can prioritize it.
So these will be reworded, but that's a really good, yeah. Okay.
I'll bring that
Great.
next time.
Thank you very much. Anything else on that?
Opposed to tabling it, I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay.
Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Huban. So, school committee members, we need to move on to the report of the resolutions committee. So this is for the MASC meeting, which will take place in the next 2 weeks. and Mr. Cohane is going to be representing us. So in the interest of time and just interest, I'm not going to read every single resolution, but I will kind of summarize and read the rationale for them. So the first resolution is called the Special Education Circuit Breaker Extension. It says, therefore, and this is just the summary here, therefore be it resolved that MASC file legislation which would have the effect of modifying the special education circuit breaker law to assist and encourage school districts to create programs to keep students in district. The modification shall be that the state will pay 75%, I won't even go into all those details, and the rationale that this is one of the rare opportunities to provide the best educational environment for students and save money at the same time. From an educational perspective, the IDEA, Individuals with Disability Act, specifies that students must be placed in the least restrictive educational setting, and that is a standard classroom. The more students that are kept in district or in collaborative programs, the closer they are to this least restrictive environment. And we've already identified in our evaluation tonight that that's something that we in Milton do a really good job of. So I will put this out for discussion.
Move we vote yes? Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Recommendation?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I recommend yes.
I'm trying to move this meeting too fast, I'm sorry. Now, all in favor? Yes. Oh, thank you. So that's unanimous. Resolution 2 is a charter school authorization. Again, there's a lot of verbiage in the actual resolution, but the rationale is this resolution would shift funding for charters to the districts that approve them, or to the state in those cases where DESE imposes charter schools upon communities that do not want them. It represents a major fiscal reform of charter school funding. It also allows districts to establish charters if they are willing to fund them, or if they receive the support of the school committee or voters. Do we have a motion?
I recommend we vote no.
Second.
Discussion? Mrs. Kelly, would you like to explain your thinking
The
around
reason
that?
I would recommend that we vote no is if a community does not want a charter school to be created in their environment, however, some members of the community do want that, the burden of paying for those students at that charter school will then come out of the total pie, which is part of our pie. You know, it's part of what would fund us. And so this is an effort, and I understand it, for communities that do have a lot of charters sprouting up around them to try and, prevent some of that from happening. But I fear that if it's a successful method, it really will come back on the rest of us to not have, part of our funding. So that's my concern.
So I didn't read it that way. I read it more that it was a way for us to not have to pay for it if someone else were to mandate that we were to have one.
Well, the problem is that, the present policy is if I don't even know what the board is, says that they can have a charter
DESE.
school, the charter school is there.
Mhm.
And then the funding comes from those public schools whose
children.
districts they're coming from.
Right.
So it flows. It's already, the money is already distributed. Now there would be a line drawn that presumably, I guess, the community that would be losing children would still get the same funding, but the charter school would have to come directly from the state again. It would be like creating another, I don't know, mini town. That's my understanding of it, though. If somebody has anything else to offer, I'd be more than happy to listen.
Did anyone else have a different, so that's a different take than I got on it. I thought that it was more protecting us from that, so.
Not from a financial perspective.
Right.
I think your point is it may protect us from a charter school being imposed on us, but we pay if it's imposed on someone else.
Right.
Exactly. That's my concern.
Okay. So, any further discussion? Do we have a recommendation from Ms. Gormley?
Not to vote for it.
To vote no. All in favor?
Of
Of a no vote.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Resolution 3 pertains to MCAS scores and Chapter 766 approved schools. It says, therefore, be it resolved that the Department of Education of Elementary and Secondary Education requires 766 approved schools, including nonprofit institutions. Non-public, thank you. Including non-public institutions who serve Massachusetts students, to report publicly their aggregate MCAS scores and growth information, but in the process preserve and protect the confidentiality of individual student records. So it would just provide more data and increase the level of accountability for private special education providers. Do we have a motion? I'm sorry.
Can I ask a question?
Move we vote yes. Second.
Discussion, Mrs. Kelly?
Just in terms of, for some reason, and I could have totally misunderstood this, I always understood that if we sent out a student to another school for special education services, that that child's score was still included in our scores.
They are.
That's correct.
And so this is just to break out of that to see how, okay.
So would the score still report in the local communities, but they also have to have a reporting mechanism
Right.
to hold them accountable? Any further discussion? Ms. Gormley, recommendation? Thank you. All in favor of a yes vote? It's unanimous, thank you. And Resolution 4, again, pertains to charter schools, funding formula. The rationale, be it resolved that the legislature should change the funding formula for charter schools. The charter school will receive funding based on the base rate components of student enrollment from the sending district. And the rationale is that charter schools have yet to be transparent in documenting provisions of in-district special education programs or providing educational programs reflective to the demographic of the sending district, including limited English proficiency or being economically disadvantaged. Yet charter schools receive foundation budget funding for incremental costs above the base. In these difficult fiscal times, sending districts need all possible financial resources to provide educational programs for students. Do we have a motion?
I move we vote yes.
We have a yes and a second. Is there discussion? Ms. Gormley, recommendation?
Yes.
Yes. All in favor of the yes vote? It's unanimous. Resolution 5, District Consolidation, Restructuring, and Expanded Regionalization. Therefore, be it resolved that MASC shall advocate before the legislature that local school governance and district structure shall remain with the discretion of cities, towns, and the citizens thereof, acting through the ballot or their delegated representatives on their city councils, school committees, town councils, and town meetings. And further, MASC shall advocate to prevent granting authority to any appointed state official, appointed board, or receiver to coerce the restructuring of any school district and its governance without the expressed approval of the school committee, city council, town meeting, town council, and voters of each affected community. Do we have a motion for this resolution?
Move we vote yes.
Any discussion? Ms. Gormley, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, I recommend this one.
All in favor of a yes vote? It's unanimous, thank you. Resolution 6 pertains to mid-year retirements. Therefore, be it resolved that the Massachusetts Association of School Committees file legislation that would end the practice of educator retirements during the school year, that while convenient for eligible educators, is not in the best interest of students. Rationale, this would end the practice of teacher retirement at times during the year that, while convenient for educators, again, is not in the best interest of students. Do we have a motion for this resolution? Ms. Gormley, do we have a recommendation?
Yes, I support it. I support this resolution.
We have a yes, a support. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Mrs.
I'll
Kelly?
move that we vote yes.
Do we have a second? Thank you. Discussion, Mrs. Kelly?
Just a question. I totally understand the educational rationale here. Are we now just making teachers sort of this special set of employees that can't retire when they want to? Do you know what I mean? I totally understand the educational impact. I would understand if it said that we highly encourage teachers to spend, to make it through the entire year. I just wonder, just from a legislative perspective, if, it would eventually be struck down by the Supreme Court because.
That was exactly, my thought was, are we able to tell people you can't retire at any
Exactly.
point? I mean, if something happens to you, if there's a question of your health and you need to retire, then is there really, what are the ramifications of someone retiring during the year? That was my question. Mr. Hubian?
I fully understand where they're going with this, but my issue is that if you require someone to be there, are you getting your full participation by that individual if they don't really want to be there? So I'd rather cut them loose and hire a new body and find some new blood.
Any further discussion?
So, can I,
You want to withdraw your?
my motion and, amend my motion. So I would recommend that the committee vote no. Anyone got
Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Ms. Gormley?
I vote yes.
She's not changing her recommendation. All in favor of a
No vote.
no vote? Opposed?
Oh, there you go.
So
Mary.
it's 5-1. And the final resolution pertains to mid-year budget cuts. Be it resolved that the legislature further prohibit changes to the appropriations for public schools without the consent of the general court, and further that the governor and legislature be urged not to enact mid-fiscal year budget rescissions, including the so-called 9C cuts to appropriations for public schools during fiscal year 2011. And the rationale behind this really is that districts spend a whole year making their budget, as we have talked about. We just finished, or we will vote on our end-of-the-year budget, and we're already starting on next year's budget. And then to be halfway through that process or that year, to then have 9C cuts, that meant we had to modify our our budgets. So, do we have a motion for this?
Move we vote yes?
Second.
Ms. Gormley?
Recommend it yes.
Any further discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. Move on to the Finance Subcommittee report.
If the committee would allow me to, I'd like to just skip over the first quarter actuals. We can put that off to another meeting. The FY12 budget development update, we did have a meeting with Leroy Walker to talk about sort of timelines and what level of detail. Yes, sorry.
Who's Leroy?
I'm sorry, Leroy. Thank you very much, sir. Leroy Walker is the chairman of the school subcommittee of the Warrant Committee.
And I don't know who he was. I
Right.
just-
I understand, and I appreciate that question. Given that we all anticipate that this will once again be a very difficult year in terms of looking at budgets, his encouragement is that the sooner we can get some level of detail that actually describes what the impact of a level dollar budget, which is what we're being asked for, to deliver is, to be able to get to that level of detail so that we can start communicating not only with the warrant committee but with the town and parents, et cetera, the better off we're going to be as a community. And I think we in past years have found that to definitely be true. So he has asked, and I think we've got an acknowledgement that December 1st, we really need to have the details of what positions and therefore impact of a level dollar, that a level dollar budget would basically be. So that's a lot of work, and it's crunched into a very small amount of time, and we're going to do our level best to get there. It does take, the administration providing first the numbers, and then the leadership team, having those very difficult meetings, trying to figure out, what's the priority. And unfortunately, that's what we have in the weeks ahead to be discussing. So as soon as we get levels of detail, we will keep the full committee updated so that everybody is on the same page in terms of where we are.
Mrs. Kelly, may I just say one thing? So I understand the importance of getting that information out first. I just want to raise a concern about what that might do for morale within the schools. I understand that we need to articulate, what our dollar amount will be, but if we're talking the beginning of December to already start identifying specific cuts of individuals within the school, I just worry that that will bring a downward turn in morale in the schools as a whole. If we start, it feels like we're just starting off the year and we're talking about the cuts that will be needed for next year. So I just want to raise that as a concern, if there's any way that we can be sensitive to that.
We'll definitely keep that in mind. I'm not sure how that plays out, but I understand the concern. Unfortunately, this is the year, unfortunately, it's a yearly cycle that we're in right now. The other issues we wanted to touch on was the guidance department head, and Ms. Gorman, could you speak to that? Yes.
Before we leave that subject?
Yes.
I understand the Finance Subcommittee works very hard and is trying to get this together for the Warrant Committee. But our meetings prior to December 1st, the last one we have is November 17th, and then it goes right to December 8th. Will the Finance Subcommittee be giving the Warrant Committee a budget that hasn't been approved by the full committee? So how can you meet that December 1st deadline if we don't have a meeting prior to that?
If I might?
Okay.
We have started to put the budgets, the personnel budget, facilities, utilities in front of the Finance Subcommittee. So we have 2 meetings in November. And so we're really going to have to target or maybe add a meeting to get to that December 1st deadline. But we have the meeting on the 17th. And so if we meet every Monday morning and we use the meeting on the 3rd to discuss the budget, and then on the 17th, we might have to have another meeting. But in our discussions and when I spoke to Mr. Walker, again, advocating for the schools to get out early, to get our message out there, and keep in mind, as we're going through all of these discussions, we have the public budget meeting on the 17th. And I had brainstormed that we would have it for an hour before our meeting on the 17th. We might want to do that an hour before the meeting on November 3rd. That might be more in the formative, we can put it out to the public. But before one of our November meetings, we wanted to hear from the public, because we always have the public budget meeting, and we will have another one in the spring. But we thought, again, tonight's Citizen Speak was valuable, and we wanted to hear from parents. And so to Mr. Huban's point, do you think that we'll be able to, Mrs. Kelly, make the deadline?
I think it's a very aggressive deadline. I think we may need to be flexible with our school committee calendar, that we may need to schedule maybe December 1st, or maybe not December 1st, if that's the deadline that we're committed to, maybe the day before, or I'm not sure. I think we just need to we need to see how things flow, and obviously, we have to do what's in the best interest of the Milton Public Schools. And if it means that we need to push out the deadline, then I think that's what we'll have to do. But let's see how it plays out. Let's hope that we can all be flexible with regards to maybe scheduling another school committee meeting, if need be, just for the budget.
So maybe if people thought about that Monday night after Thanksgiving. And this time frame might be aggressive, and we're very public about it, but I said that I always remember Thanksgiving being, not really a holiday for business managers and assistant superintendents for business. It seems like historically, that's when the budgets were all tied together.
Black Friday means something different to you?
No Thanksgiving for Mr. Gillis. So, again, we appreciate the Warrant Committee working with us, and we're going to aggressively try to meet every one of their deadlines. And so to the point about the guidance department head, if I might, you've followed, the public has followed, the school committee has followed over the last 2 years, our stimulus funds and our sped stimulus funds. And I'll bring you back to last summer when the jobs bill provided and targeted the Milton Public Schools with $378,000. And so, again, as we've discussed tonight, we're conservative with those funds, and every school district has reading teachers. And it's always been an issue in the Milton Public Schools, and when cuts have been made, we prioritize the classroom teacher. And with those funds, the recommendation from the leadership team, we went to the finance subcommittee and the school committee, and we put in 2 reading teachers that target only first and second graders in the elementary schools of Milton, 1 reading teacher for 4 schools. We heard about art tonight. An equal story is, you know, if you went to all of these districts, they would have reading teachers. Reading teachers are able to work with individual and groups of students to work on issues in the early grades that sometimes are remedial in nature and then don't have to turn into special education plans. So that was our only use of the money. And then I bring you back to last year, cutting 24 positions, the warrant committee restoring the 7 teaching positions, and then working in the reorganization of Pierce School, we secured the assistant principal when the 2 assistants and curriculum directors were appointed principals. And the 1 position left that was in the academic area was the guidance director, K through 12. Again, this is all about budget. We have a custodian we didn't fill. Over the years, you know, we've always heard you have to cut in the administration level, the teaching level, the support level, the custodial level. And so we've gotten feedback from the public and from this school committee about the guidance department head. And so, working with the finance subcommittee and the school committee, and then working with the union, we made a proposal to restructure that position that would save valuable dollars and make that position a department head at the high school for guidance, 9 through 12, reducing the number of days, reducing the K through 8 responsibilities, reducing the salary of the prior position, what the position would have been, and we got agreement all the way around. So what I'm recommending tonight for the school committee's approval is using our jobs fund, our jobs bill funds. Again, keeping in mind, we hired 2 reading teachers to put for the balance of the school year, guidance department head back to restore that position in a 9 through 12 position, which is a reduced salary and a reduced number of days, but the responsibilities would be equal at Milton High School.
And I'm sorry, I wasn't able to attend Monday's meeting. So was there a recommendation from the finance subcommittee on this? So the recommendation was yes. And the funding again would be from?
The jobs bill.
The jobs bill.
And again, if somebody's viewing, and when we talked about this internally, obviously somebody's going to say, what about next year? We have the jobs bill. These are the hard decisions. To the point about the budget, those who understand it will be saying, we have a budget and it's detailed, but now we have introduced positions that we've hired over the last 2 years out of the stimulus funds, and now we're going to have positions out of the jobs bill. And this is all going to be intertwined in a very involved budget when we make the recommendations for next year. But for the balance of this school year, as I always say, we have 4,000 children in front of us. We work for these 4,000 children, and we have the balance of the school year in place. We have this jobs bill funds, and we want to restore this position in a reduced budgetary number than it would have been as the director.
Do we have a motion?
So I would move that we approve of the hiring of a guidance department head for grades 9 through 12, with the funding being the jobs bill.
Thank you.
Do we have discussion? So I have a question. If we are hiring this, or we're filling this position, does that mean there'll be a guidance opening within the high school?
Well, it's very involved because there's a contract and the position has to be offered to the individual who had it, and there are 15 days according to the contract, so that we have got about 3 or 4 different contingency plans. There could be a .5 addition of a .5 guidance person at the high school. We've done an examination of all of the surrounding communities, what the caseload should be, what the length of the school year should be. So it's going to involve perhaps a part-time person picking up some of the caseload. But we have about 4 or 5 different contingency plans that we'll be able to report out of the November 3rd, how in fact. And our goal is to provide for, you heard tonight, Ms. Bagley-Jones ask about the college process. So the students are our priority, the consistency of who your guidance counselors are in providing for the children and the students at Milton High School. That's our priority, and we'll report out to you what all this is going to involve.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor? Opposed? Abstained?
I put my finger up.
Oh,
sorry.
did you?
Yeah.
Sorry. I guess
Maybe
it
you
was,
didn't scan that quickly.
it was unanimous. I started down there, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.
The next item is the end-of-year report, and I would ask Mr. Gillis to give us a little update on that.
Sure. The end of the year report was completed yesterday afternoon. It's for folks at home. It's a fairly long report where we break out all of our financial activities in the format that the Department of Ed wants, and the entire report's close to 80 pages. So, of all of our operations, and this report is compiled by Lisa McDonough, our budget analyst, and she's been doing it for the last 10 years, and she does a very good job. The auditors really don't find any problems with it. I've gone over it, and I gave her some questions back this morning. She gave me the answers on the line items that I checked, and I have no hesitations about submitting this report to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I still call them the DOE. It's just a habit I may never fully break at this point in time. And I believe you folks were given copies of this report and was emailed out. Hopefully you didn't waste all your own paper printing it out. And next time, I'll make sure you get a hard copy. But if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Some of the details behind some of the numbers is there may be 4 or 5 funds, or funds go into one number and you can't tie it out. I tested Lisa with some of those, and she came back with flying colors and all the things that the auditor would look for. Is I have to compile this report, and it takes generally a couple of weeks worth of work to pull it all together. So it's no small task, but it's where the state comes up with all of the financial comparisons between all the other school systems. And if actually we don't do it, come springtime, they could withhold our Chapter 70 money. So it's good that we always get it in on time or with whatever extension they're willing to give.
Ms. Gormley?
And I was just going to say that, to Mr. Gillis's point, there are districts that actually hire people to come in just to do their end-of-the-year report. So this is an integral part of our business office, and I want to compliment Lisa McDonough, who, again, as Mr. Gillis said, every year, the auditors, she works collaboratively with them, and we can be proud of our end-of-the-year report. She does an outstanding job. And it's very time-consuming and detail-oriented.
Mrs. Kelly?
So I would move that we approve the submission of the FY10 end-of-year report to DOE.
Thank you.
DESE.
Or whoever.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Huban?
I don't think I heard this earlier, but could you just reiterate for the audience why we're submitting it late?
We're submitting the report a little bit late. We did get an extension. The general deadline is September 30th, but obviously the handful of folks at the state school business office that collects and reviews all these reports, they can't review them all at once. So if you ask, you can generally get an extension. We have an extension till October 29th. We had some people Lisa can't do the report entirely by herself. She needs some help from folks in other departments in the school and at the town. And you need the data to come in a certain order to finish things. So we were unable to finish by the 30th due to vacation leave and staff turnover. But it's not really a problem. In my 8 or 9 years doing this report before, I had personally 4 extensions in different years for different reasons. But the state never holds it against you as long as the report gets in.
Mr. Gillis was very comfortable asking for that too, for 3 weeks.
Any further questions or discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
And then just one last thing that I'd like to mention is as we talked about earlier, the open budget hearing, which will be Wednesday, November 17th at 7? Is it to be, is that that's a regular school committee
Right.
meeting? Are we
So-
having an earlier meeting, or are
It's
we
the
starting
pleasure
it
of
at
the committee.
7?
Well, Ms. Gormley, I heard you say start an hour earlier. Is that what
Yeah,
you were
The
suggesting? So
parents-
we would,
Yes, we thought about doing it 6 to 7 before the school committee meeting, if that's to everybody's pleasure, on the 17th.
that's fine. I think just as long as people have ample notice of that and it can go out in all
And
your
to the point of the
communications.
finance subcommittee, to have 2 open budget meetings, and that you have always asked to have this in on time and to be able to vote it before it's sent in, we're working to meet all the deadlines.
So what happens if we have lots and lots of parents and we run over an hour? We just,
You do it.
We just do.
we're
That's what we
just
do.
here.
Yep.
Cable is shaking their head. Poor Mike saying, oh, no. Sorry.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kelly. On to the policy subcommittee. Mr. Hubian?
Okay, we have the second reading of the media policy. The media policy was put into place so that we had people that they know who to go to. We also wanted to make sure that if pictures were taken in the schools, that the children in the pictures, their parents had signed releases that they could be in the pictures. So this basically spells it out very clearly for anyone that's interested in photographing or taking the responses from someone in the schools.
Oh, sorry.
We need a motion for,
We need a
to
motion.
approve.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? So this is the second reading, so all in favor? Or Ms. Gormley, do you have a recommendation?
I
for me?
recommend this policy, do you pass this policy, please?
All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
The second policy is for pregnant students. You remember, based on an audit that we had, we needed to remove language that required someone who was pregnant to give us a doctor's order that they could return to the school. We were asked to remove that language, and we did. This is the second reading, so we'll need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Kelly?
So I hopped on masc.org and looked at another school district that has this policy, and they reference state law that says that a school committee may require that a student be under the supervision of a physician, and that's from the state law. So I'm just wondering where this stands. Has this been reviewed by legal?
I can, yeah, yes, and this has to do with our audit, and,
I understand.
right,
But I guess what I had raised previously was, are there any issues for us as a school system having a student who's pregnant sort of in our walls and without a physician's sort of note? And I don't know,
well,
but I guess
does this,
the state law, where it says that it can be, that the student should be under the supervision of a physician, I don't know that we can say the nurse can then take over that role. I guess that's my concern.
now, let us look at confidential assessment. An individual plan is created for each student with consultation and collaboration between the student, guardian, nurse, and if appropriate, medically necessary, the physician.
Right, but who determines that? Do you know what I'm saying? I guess I just don't think this is very clear in terms of where our responsibility ends.
I believe the state law says may require, correct?
Right, it says the school committee may require that a student be under the supervision of a physician. But why would it be in the law if there wasn't a reason for that? I guess, again, I'm not sure what the legal lines are. I just worry about issues of whose responsibilities, whose.
And it sounds like you're also raising an issue with the conflict with our policy and the law.
Right, no, I don't think this I don't think this is necessarily a conflict. I'm just wondering, and I understand, somebody said, came in from the set, said you have to change this. I'm just wondering if maybe it's other districts aren't aware of that, or MASC is basically our reference people. And I guess maybe I would ask that perhaps, if anybody else agrees, that we contact MASC and just discuss it with them.
Up to the consensus of the committee.
Right, exactly.
Ms. Gormley, do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, you can, that's fine. We can call MASC and we have more policies for the 3rd and then review it again. I had legal review it, and the DESC's coming out, and this is their recommended policy. But I don't mind having MASC review it, and we can hold this one till the next meeting, the 3rd. I'll recommend we hold it to the 3rd.
Our request is that you remove the motion or ask the motion to be removed.
Did I
You
make?
made, I think you made it.
That's fine. I'll withdraw.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you
Okay.
for clarification.
The next item on the agenda is the homeless policy. Basically, the homeless policy, this is the first reading, there's no vote taken tonight. Just reiterates that we follow the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which is a federal law, and everyone has to adhere to it. And that's basically what we're putting in the books. So there's no vote tonight. If you do have any questions, John Phelan has said that he would answer them. And we'll take this up at our next meeting.
Do you have any questions
We
currently?
also did have a policy subcommittee meeting where we worked on a policy on Facebook and social networking. We also discussed a procurement policy and a gift policy review. We also have ongoing the superintendent evaluation and the student assignment gray area discussion. So those are still ongoing. That's my report.
Another busy committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Huban. Ms. Bagley-Jones, could we have a health and wellness subcommittee report?
Yes, I was going to suggest I wait till next meeting,
It
but
would be
then
fine if you would like to do that.
I would be happy to wait till next meeting if I can just announce, and if I can go first next time, that Ms. Gormley was going to talk about Greg Hall is coming here on Wednesday, November 9th, to talk to
Yes.
parents about cyberbullying. We talked about that at Health and Wellness. It's something
Circle that
Ms.
night.
Gormley does, and that the bullying prevention presentation by John Halligan was very well received by the grades 7 through 12 students, staff, and by the parents. And then I'll stop and talk about the health and wellness, because we did a lot of good stuff, but I'll wait until next time.
That's great.
So the
Thank
circle on your calendars, the 9th,
you. November 9th?
November
Yeah.
9th.
It's a Tuesday night.
Bentley College and Professor Greg Hall, who's a parent and a teacher at Bentley, professor at Bentley, will be presenting with the Bentley students for parents on bullying.
Thank you. School Building Committee report, Mr. Pavlicek, please.
Still having those?
I know.
Yeah, we haven't had one for,
We
we
haven't
haven't had
had
a
a
report in a
report.
while.
Do you want to do it at the next meeting?
We can do it the next time. We're trying hard to put ourselves out of business,
We are.
and we're succeeding very well. I mean, quickly, the ductwork on the roof and the photovoltaics over at Cunningham College are the last two major issues, and they're both 90-something% done. It's just a question of some commissioning and various things like that. So the work is done, and then it's a question of just cleaning out the books, getting the MTC grant in, and cleaning up the issue of where we are with the owner-controlled insurance program account. So it's more into bookkeeping after, probably, and getting the historical signage in the two auditoria. All right, so those are the
Before town
remaining
meeting.
pieces. of the school building project, which hopefully will end soon.
And Mr. Pavlicek is doing a great job working on those books, so I appreciate your commitment to that as well. Facilities Committee will report out next meeting as well. We'll put that off, so thank you. I do want to just say before we close that it's been, as you drive around town, school by school, you see how beautiful they look, and I want to just give a shout out to the landscapers, Eagle Farms, who does the high school, Driscoll landscapers, who take care of Cunningham, Collycott, and Coulter, who take care of Tucker. And we're still looking for someone for Piers, if there's
And Glover.
and Glover. If there are landscapers out there that would love to be recognized, please don't hesitate to contact myself or Ms. Gormley to sign up for that very important job. So thank you to everyone. We, our next agenda items, besides the ones that we've always said, are there any others? And is there any old business discussion? No,
Yes, I do.
Oh.
Very timely, Dr. Noreen Diamond Burdette sent this literature to the school committee as a follow-up to the art presentation from the prior meeting from the art department.
That was requested. Thank you very much. And at this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to, for the purpose of
Only the litigation.
possible litigation, not to return, potential.
No, pending litigation. Sorry.
Pending litigation. Not to return to public session, but to adjourn directly from the executive session. Do we have a motion?
Second.
This will be done by roll call vote. Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Bagley Jones? Mr. Sheridan, yes. Mr. Pavlicek?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen? Mr. Hubian?
Yes.
Thank you, Cable. Thanks to all the parents that came out tonight, and welcome to our new school committee members. So, thank you.